A Guilty Thing Surprised by Ruth Rendell. When Quentin Nightingale left home for London each morning, his wife was still asleep. His housekeeper served him with breakfast, opened the front door for him, and handed him his hat and his umbrella, while the au pair girl fetched his newspaper. Next, to speed him on his way, were the two gardeners, saluting him with a respectful "Good morning, sir," and then perhaps his brother-in-law, hurrying to the sequestered peace of his writer's haven in the old house. On this particular morning in early September, everything was just as usual, except that Quentin didn't need his umbrella. The gardens of Myfleet Manor lay half-veiled by a golden mist which promised a beautiful day. Quentin was a little early. He strolled to the low wall and looked down over the Kingsbrook Valley. The view never ceased to delight him. Hardly another house was visible, only the meadows and the river, winding through its thin sleeve of willows, and there to his left on the other side of the road, the great fir forest. It covered a whole range of hills, and this morning in the mist it looked like a dark velvet cloak flung carelessly across the landscape. He turned his gaze to his own parkland, and he was just considering whether he should take a rose, an iceberg perhaps, or a superstar, when a finger touched his shoulder and a cool voice said, "To her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man." "Good morning, Dennis," Quentin said heartily. "Not a very cheerful quotation to make on a lovely morning." "If I'm not cheerful," Dennis Villiers said, "it must be because term begins in 2 days' time, and after that I shan't get any more work done till Christmas. By the way, I've something for you." He opened his briefcase and brought out a book, new, glossy, evidently fresh from the binders. "An advance copy," he said. "I thought you might like it." Quentin's face lit with pleasure. He read the title, Wordsworth in Love by Dennis Villiers, and then he turned to the dedication. This he read aloud. "For my brother-in-law, Quentin Nightingale, a true friend and patron." "Ah, Dennis, that's wonderful. Makes me feel like Southampton." Villiers gave one of his crooked, rare smiles. "As long as you like it. Well, as I have work to do, and so do you." Elizabeth Nightingale spent an hour preparing herself for the world. The effect aimed at was one of simple youth, spotless, fresh, lightly painted, dressed with casual precision, or perhaps precise casualness. People said she looked no more than 25. Ever democratic, she took her morning coffee with the staff in the kitchen. The two gardeners sat at either end of the table, and Elizabeth sat opposite Katja Doorn. Mrs. Cantrip drank her coffee standing up, issuing orders. "If you catch sight of Alf Tornywell, mind you tell him I've got a chicken ordered for tonight, and I want it in this morning. Katja, when you've drunk your coffee, you can take Mr. Villiers over to him. And turn off that radio. Madam doesn't want to listen to that racket, I'm sure." "Oh, but I love pop, Mrs. Cantrip," said Elizabeth. Sean lifted his head. "Only got to look at you," he said, "to see you no square." Shocked, Mrs. Cantrip said, "That's no way to talk to Madam." "I take it as a great compliment," said Elizabeth. Sean's dark face flushed with pleasure. "Never mind, Sean," said Elizabeth with her sweet smile. "Now, I've packed up a parcel for your mother, Katja. Some of those biscuits she can't get in Holland. You'll find it on the hall table with a parcel of mine. Perhaps you'd take them to the post." "Madam," said Mrs. Cantrip when Elizabeth had gone, "is an angel. It's a crying shame There aren't more about like her." Catcher giggled. Elizabeth didn't appear for tea. Out in the grounds, Will Palmer lit a bonfire down by the gate, which led into the King's Markham Road. Sweating and grumbling, Sean pushed the motor mower over the terraced lawns. Mrs. Cantrip laid the dining table, left a cold dinner on the trolley, and went home to her cottage at the other end of the village. In the old house, Dennis Villiers typed 3 more sentences on Wordsworth, and then he too went home. He drove slowly and cautiously to his bungalow in Clusterwell, to be followed half an hour later by Catcher Dawn, revving up the Mini and making it roar and squeal its way through the villages to King's Markham. Elizabeth lay on her bed, with witch hazel pads on her eyes, conserving her beauty. When she heard the Jaguar come in, she began to dress for dinner. She wore a pale green caftan with crystal embroidery at the neck and wrists. "How's my beautiful wife?" "I'm fine, darling. Had a good day?" "Not so bad. London's like a hothouse. Can I get you a drink?" "Just a small tomato juice," said Elizabeth. Quentin poured it for her, and for himself a double whiskey. "Thank you, darling. It is hot, isn't it?" Silence fell. Quentin broke it. "Catcher not about?" "She's taken the Mini into King's Markham, darling." Quentin smiled. "Makes a pleasant change, really," he said. "To be on our own." "We may as well have dinner," said Elizabeth. In the dining room he opened a bottle of Puy Fissé. Elizabeth took only 1 glass. Presently they returned to the drawing-room. Quentin said, "I think I'll give Dennis a ring, and see if they'll come over for a hand of bridge. What do you think?" "I really don't mind, one way or the other, darling." "Well, I'll just give him a ring, then," said Quentin, expelling pent-up breath in a long sigh. The Villiers arrived, and they played bridge till 10. "It mustn't be too late, Georgina," said Villiers. "I've got a couple of hours' work to put in at the school library before I go to bed." His wife gave him a mutinous glare. "Dennis is dedicated to his work," said Quentin, the peacemaker. "Talking of dedications," he said to his brother-in-law, "will you write in the book for me?" Using a broken old ballpoint, Dennis Villiers wrote on the flyleaf, "The thought of our past years in me doth breed perpetual benediction." Quentin read it. A faint flush of pleasure coloured his cheeks. He laid his hand on Villiers' shoulder. "Now, write your name," he said. So Villiers wrote beneath the quotation, "Your brother, Dennis Villiers." "It's not like you to be inaccurate. It ought to be brother-in-law." "There's no need," said Villiers sharply, shaking off the hand, "for too much bloody accuracy." "I think I'll go straight to bed," said Quentin. "I can't wait to start the new book." "It's such a fine evening," said Elizabeth. "I may have a walk in the grounds." "I may have a walk in the grounds." "Wrap up warm, darling. I'll say good night, then." "Good night, darling." Elizabeth fetched herself a coat. In the moonlight, late-blooming roses, pink, apricot, lemon, all looked white tonight. She walked across the turf between the rose beds, then by the paved path between yew hedges to a door in the red brick wall. The smoke from Will's fire rose in a thin grey column. Elizabeth unlocked the gate and let herself out onto the grass verge, which separated the wall from the Pomfret Road. As car headlights flared, she stepped back for a moment into the shadows of the garden. Catcher in the Mini coming home from King's Markham. Once more the road was empty, lit only by the moon. Elizabeth closed the gate behind her, crossed the road, and began to walk away from it by a sandy path that led into Cheriton Forest. When she was out of sight of the road, she sat down on a log, waiting. Presently she lit a cigarette, the third of the 5 she would smoke that day. It was Detective Inspector Michael Burden's day off, and he began on the task to which he intended to devote his free day, painting the outside of his bungalow. "You can do the front door, John," he said, knowing that he was conferring a special favour. "Blimey, can I?" said 11-year-old John. "Don't say blimey. It means God blind me, and you know I don't like to hear you swear." John trotted off to fetch a virgin pot of flamingo pink paint. There he encountered his sister Pat, feeding lime leaves to a hawk moth caterpillar imprisoned in a shoebox. He was about to say something calculated to aggravate, when his mother called to him. "John, tell Daddy he's wanted on the phone, will you?" "Who wants him?" Mrs. Burden said in a voice of resigned despair. "Can't you guess?" John returned to his father, who had just put the first stroke of top coat on the picture window frame. "Cop shop on the phone for you," he said. Burden never swore, in front of his children or in their absence. Carefully he placed his brush in a jam jar of synthetic turps and entered the house. The voice of Detective Chief Inspector Wexford said nastily, "You took your bloody time." "I'm sorry, I was painting." "Hard cheese, Picasso, duty calls. Do you know a Mrs. Elizabeth Nightingale?" "By sight? Everybody knows her." "Husband's a Lloyd's underwriter. Lots of money." "What's she done?" "Got herself murdered, that's what she's done." "I'm at Myfleet Manor. Get over here as soon as you can, Mike." It was a red brick house, built during the reign of Queen Anne. Burden parked his car behind the bigger official one Wexford had arrived in and mounted the steps to the front door. Detective Sergeant Martin opened it. "Chief Inspector's in the what they call the morning room, sir." It was a small, elegant room, its panelling painted in cream and blue. Squeezed into a small chair, upholstered in cream satin, Wexford looked mountainous. His face was grave, but his eyes were alert and watchful, fixed on the woman who sat on the opposite side of the fireplace. Glancing at the neat white hair, the homely red face furrowed by tears, and the trim blue nylon overall, Burden summed her up as an old and devoted retainer. "Come in," said Wexford. "Sit down. This is Mrs. Cantrip. She has kept house for Mr. and Mrs. Nightingale since they were married 16 years ago." "That's right, sir," said Mrs. Cantrip, "and a lovelier person than Mrs. Nightingale you couldn't wish to meet." Burden sat down gingerly on another satin chair. "I'm sure I don't know what you must think of us, sir," said Mrs. Cantrip, misinterpreting his expression. "The place in the state it is. But nothing's been done this morning. Me and Catcher, we haven't felt up to lifting a duster." She turned to Wexford and sniffed back her tears. "Well, sir, you said as you wanted to see everyone in the house, so I mustn't keep you now the other gentleman's come. There's old Will Palmer, him that found her poor dead body, and Sean Lovell and Catcher." "Who's Catcher?" "The foreign girl, what they call an au pair, sir. You'll find her up in her room on the top floor. And then there's poor Mr. Nightingale himself, locked in his study, and won't open the door to no one." "I will see Palmer first," said Wexford. They followed Mrs. Cantrip down a long passage and into the garden via the kitchen. "Thank you, Mrs. Cantrip. I think I can see Mr. Palmer coming up to meet us." The grounds were being searched by men in uniform and men in plain clothes. Will Palmer stopped in the middle of the lawn, looking surly, as Constable Bryant thrust his arms into the green depths of the lily pond. "The body has been photographed and removed," said Wexford. "Someone hit her on the head. They're looking for the weapon now. There was a hell of a lot of blood." He raised his voice. "Mr. Palmer, will you come over here, please?" He was a tall, lean old man, with hard, fleshless features that the wind and the weather had polished to the tint of rosewood. "I reckoned you'd want a word with me," he said. Wexford pointed in the direction of a thin column of smoke. "How long has that bonfire been burning?" "Since yesterday afternoon, Governor." "I see. Where can we go and talk, Mr. Palmer?" "We could go into the Italian garden." They sat down on a long seat of metal scrollwork beside a formal pool whose waters were still muddy from the investigations of its bottom by Wexford's men. "Well, it was like this," said Palmer. "That old wind come up in the night, making such a racket it woke me up, near enough 4:30. First thing I thought of was Mr. Nightingale's chrysanthemums, them as were getting ready for the flower show. They were standing out in the open in their pots, see? So I got on my bike and I come up here quick as I could." "At what time did you get here, Mr. Palmer?" "About 5. Palmer spoke with relish. "Them chrysanthemums was all standing up well, but I put 'em into the greenhouse to be on the safe side. Then I saw one of them French windows wide open. I thought they've had burglars. I reckoned it was my duty to wake Mr. Nightingale, so I went in and up the stairs and banged on his bedroom door. Must be a heavy sleeper, I thought, and I took the liberty of going in to have a look. His bed was empty. 'Mr. Nightingale,' I said, 'are you there, sir?' Thinking that he might be in his bathroom, the door being shut." "But you didn't look," Wexford interrupted. "I hope I know my place, sir. Besides, for all they slept separate like, they was married and—" "And you thought quite reasonably that he might have spent the night in Mrs. Nightingale's room?" "I did that. So I took it upon myself to knock on Madam's door. Nobody come, and I was beginning to get the wind up. Nothing else would have got me barging into a lady's bedroom. Well, she wasn't there either, and the bed not touched." "You didn't think of calling the au pair girl?" "Never crossed my mind, Governor. I went round the grounds and then found the wall gate open. Best get on to the phone to the police yourself, Will, I thought. But when I got back to the house, Mr. Nightingale was up and about. Been having a bath, he said, and when he'd dried himself and come out, I was gone." "What happened next?" asked Burden. "Mr. Nightingale said Madam must have met with an accident while she was out in the grounds. But I said I'd searched the grounds. Then I said I thought of that open gate and that dark forest, and my heart turned over. I reckon she went into the forest and come over bad, I said to poor Mr. Nightingale. So we went into the forest, and I went first, and then I found her. Lying face down she was, with blood all over her lovely golden hair." "You've been very helpful." "Always try to do my duty, sir. Mr. Nightingale's been real good to me, and Madam too. There's some I could name as would take advantage, but not me. I reckon I belong to what they call the old school." "Did Sean, what's his name, take advantage?" Wexford asked softly. "Lovell, Governor. Sean Lovell." "Well, now he did in a manner of speaking, that Lovell. Common as dirt he is. His mother's no better than she should be, and I don't reckon he never had no father. Turn you up it would to see the inside of their cottage. But he fancied himself Madam's equal. Elizabeth this and Elizabeth that, he says to me behind her back. 'Don't you let me hear you refer to Madam like that,' I said, snubbing him proper." Burden said impatiently, "How did he take advantage?" "Fancies himself singing in one of them pop groups he does. Madam was soft, you see, and she'd smile and listen ever so patient when he'd start his singing. Sang to her, he did." Palmer mouthed disgustedly. "When she'd got the window open, he'd come up underneath and sing one of them rubbishy songs he'd got off the telly. Skillful conversion had transformed the largest attic into an open-plan flat for the au pair girl. "Speak good English, do you, Miss Dawn?" Wexford asked as she admitted them. "Oh, no. I am very bad," said the Dutch girl, giggling. "Everybody tell me I am very, very bad." Her hair was pale gold and long, her eyes a bright, frank blue, and her skin dazzling. When she laughed, and she seemed to be laughing always, her face lit up and glowed. "How long," he said, "have you been living here with Mr. and Mrs. Nightingale?" "Nearly 1 year and a half." "So you know them well? You lived as one of the family?" "There is no family," said Katja, pushing out full pink lips in disgust. "Just him and her, and now she is dead." "Yes, indeed, that's why I'm here. No doubt you were a good friend to Mrs. Nightingale, like a grown-up daughter." Katja laughed. "A daughter? Mrs. Nightingale wouldn't like to hear that, I think. No, she thinks she's a young girl, very young and pretty, in little mini-skirts and eyeliner on, so—" Burden fixed her with a disapproving glare. Persisting doggedly, Wexford said, "Nevertheless, you were in her confidence. Please?" Burden came to his assistance. "She talked to you about her life." "Me? No, never. At lunch we sit, so. She there, I hear. How is your mother, Katja? Will it rain today? Now I lie down and have my little rest. But talk? No, we do not talk." "You must have been very lonely." "Me?" The giggles broke out in fresh gusts. "Perhaps if I stay in all day with him and her and all evening too, then I am lonely. No, I have my friends in King's Markham, many, many friends, boys and girls. Why do I like to stay here with old people?" "They were only in their 40s, said 36-year-old Burden hotly. "This," said Katja calmly, "is what I am saying to you. I am young, they old." She looked at him as if she were wondering whether he was obtainable. She giggled. Blushing, Burden said sharply, "What did you see when you came home last night?" "Well, I am going to the movies with my friend who is a waiter at the Olive and Dove. First we see the movie, a Swedish film, very sexy. Make me feel so hot, you understand?" "Oh, yes," said Burden, looking down. "This is natural," said Katja severely, "when one is young. Afterwards I wish to go with my friend to his room, but he will not, because there is a manager at the hotel who is not letting him have girls. So we are sad, and my friend takes me instead to the Carousel Cafe." "What time was this?" "It is 9:45 when we leave the movies. We are having our coffee, and then we are sitting in the car, kissing and cuddling, but very sad because we cannot go to his room. My friend must rise very early in the morning, so he go back to the hotel and I go home. Now it is—" "What time was this?" "It is 9:45 when we leave the movies. We are having our coffee, and then we are sitting in the car, kissing and cuddling, but very sad because we cannot go to his room. My friend must rise very early in the morning, so he go back to the hotel and I go home. Now it is 11, I think." "You saw Mrs. Nightingale leave the manor grounds?" "Her I am seeing coming out of the gate near where the bonfire is burning. And she is seeing me too. This I know, because she is closing the gate quick and hiding till I go by. Very funny, I think to myself. So I drive up along the road, and I am leaving the car parked and walking back very soft, very secret, to see if she's coming out again. She's coming out again, she said triumphantly. I see her cross the road and go into the wood, and she is walking very quiet, looking like this over her shoulder. Katja pantomimed it. Then I know what she's doing. Many, many times I, too, walked like this when I was going to meet my friend in the woods. Over my shoulder I am looking, to see that no one is following Wexford to spy what we do. Look at Burden. It wouldn't have surprised him if the inspector, like the man in Bleak House, had entirely disappeared, melting away by a process of spontaneous combustion. He said, "You'll be very frank with us, Miss Durn." "I am good, yes?" said Katja with intense satisfaction. "I tell you things." "We shall want to talk to you again, Miss Durn." "Yes, I think so too," said Katja, giggling. She curled up in her chair and watched them go, her eyes dancing. "Now for Nightingale," said Wexford. He had the kind of looks women call distinguished. His hair was silver without a black strand, and he wore a small silver moustache. His tall figure was as slim as Sean Lovell's, his chin muscles firm and his skin unlined. Elizabeth Nightingale had been more than usually pretty, and her widower was more than usually rich, besides being handsome enough to match her beauty. But this morning he looked almost ugly, his features haggard and drawn. Wexford's anger dissolved into an impatient pity. Quentin Nightingale had been crying. "I'm sorry, sir. I must question you, just as I must question everybody else." "I realize that." The voice was low, cultured, and ragged. "It was childish of me to lock myself in here. What do you want to ask me?" "First of all, tell me about last evening. Did you and Mrs. Nightingale spend it alone?" "No. My brother-in-law and his wife came up to play bridge with us. They came at about 8:30 and left at 10:30. My brother-in-law said he had some research to do at the school library." "I see. How did your wife seem last night?" "My wife? My wife was quite normal, gay and lovely as always." His voice broke and he steadied it. "She was particularly sweet to my sister-in-law. She gave her some present and Georgina was delighted." "What was the present, sir?" "I don't know. I only heard Georgina thank her for it." Burden shifted on his stool. "Why did your wife go into the forest, Mr. Nightingale?" "I don't know that either. She often went for a walk in the late evening." "You were a happily married couple, sir?" "Ideally happy. Ask any of our friends. Oh, God, would I be like this, the way I am, if we hadn't been happy?" "Please don't distress yourself, Mr. Nightingale," Wexford said gently. "Now, you're aware that Palmer came into your bedroom just after 5 this morning but couldn't find you. Would you mind telling me where you were?" A dark, ashamed flush coloured Quentin's face. "I was in the bath. I woke early because of the wind blowing. I couldn't get to sleep again, so I had a bath." "Very well, Mrs. Nightingale. I should like to search this house now, if you please." "As you like," said Quentin. Altogether there were 15 rooms, each furnished with taste and apparently with love, nearly every one a museum of objets d'art. Only the petals fallen from flower arrangements told of half a day's neglect. And yet, despite the dahlia-filled vases and the pale sunbeams, the place had a cold, sepulchral air. Quentin's bed had been made. Beside it on a low table lay a book which Wexford glanced at, making no comment. Burden went into the bathroom. "The bath towel's still wet, sir," he called. "It's on a hot rail, though. And it wouldn't take 7 hours to dry, would it?" Wexford shook his head. "He's either had 2 baths," he said, "or just one, and that at 9 or 10 this morning." "You mean the first one was a real cleaning-up operation? In that case, there ought to be blood on the towel or somewhere, and there isn't. We'll check the laundry with Mrs. Cantrip. Let's go next door." The dead woman's bedroom was papered in lilac and silver. While Burden searched the dressing table and lifted the lid of a writing desk, Wexford examined the wardrobe. Mrs. Nightingale had possessed enough clothes to stock a boutique. "No diary," said Burden. "A couple of receipted dressmakers' bills from a shop in Bruton Street, London, a place called Tanya Tai. The bills she's paid were for £150 and £200, and a third one outstanding for another £95. No interest there, I think." Wexford moved on to the dressing table. He lifted from its surface jars of cream, bottles of lotion, lastly a flagon of liquid whose declared purpose was to lift and brace facial muscles. Burden said, "What a waste of money, when you've got to get old anyway. I don't suppose she went to all this trouble for her husband, do you?" "No. There was another man." Burden nodded. "The man she went to meet last night, presumably," he said. "What's your theory, sir?" "I've got a theory," said Wexford. They descended slowly. The staircase was long and shallow, with a wide landing halfway down. "Here a window gave onto the third side of our triangle," said Wexford, pointing down at the hothouse. "Sean Lovell, the gardener's boy? Why, he can't be more than 20, and she— I never heard of such a thing." "Oh, rubbish," said Wexford. "Of course you've heard of it." Sean Lovell opened the door of the hothouse for them, and they stepped into steamy tropical heat. The perfume, the heat and the colours suited Sean's rather exotic looks. His jet-black hair and golden skin suggested Italian or Greek descent. "She was a very nice lady, a real lady," Sean said gruffly. "Always on the lookout for what she could do for you. And she has to go and get herself murdered. It's like my old lady says, it's always the good as dies young." "I'd like to know your movements last night. What time did you knock off here, and where did you go?" Sean said sullenly, "I knock off at 5. I went home to my tea, had my tea, and I watched the telly all evening." "You watched television right up to the time you went to bed?" "That's what I did. You asked my old lady." "Tell me the programmes you saw." "There was Pop Panel, and then the Hollywood musical till 10. "You went to bed at 10? "I don't remember. I can't remember what I saw, and when I went to bed. How can I? I reckon we went on with our viewing after that. Yeah, it was Sammy Davis Jr. That's what he was." The dark face lit suddenly with an almost religious awe. "My God, I'd like to be like him. I'd like to be him." Chilled by Wexford's eyes, he said rapidly, "I got to go now. I've got to get on with my work. Old Will be after me." He sidled past Wexford. Suddenly, in the doorway, Mrs. Cantrip loomed. "Your dinner's ready in the kitchen, Sean. Get cracking, do, or it'll be stone cold." Sean made for the kitchen at a run. "Odd that," said Wexford. "Sammy Davis was booked to appear on television last night, but the programme was cancelled at the last moment. They put on an old film instead." He patted Burden's shoulder. "Off you go to lunch now, Mike. I'll join you when I can." He watched Burden go, and then caught up with Mrs. Cantrip. Who were Mrs. Nightingale's friends? Who came visiting to the manor? Mrs. Nightingale was never one of them as gossips her, or passes the day on the telephone. The ladies she saw was to do with business, like arranging bazaars and gymkhanas, if you know what I mean. Then her voice took on a sad importance. Then there was their friends, as came here to dine, Sir George and Lady Larkin-Smith, and Mr. and Mrs. Primero, and all the county folk, sir. Gentlemen friends? Mrs. Cantrip shook her head vigorously. Her friends was their friends, sir, she said. Would there be anything else you wanted to know? Whose job is it to change the linen in this house, the sheets and towels? Mine, sir, said Mrs. Cantrip, surprised. And did you remove any damp towels from Mr. Nightingale's bathroom this morning? No, sir, definitely not. It's not the day for that. I change the sheets Monday mornings, and the towels Mondays and Thursdays. Suppose someone else were to have, Wexford began carefully. They couldn't have, said Mrs. Cantrip sharply. The soiled linen's kept in a bin in the back kitchen, and no one's been near it today. Now, if you'll excuse me, sir, I've got my lunch to serve. I'm sure I don't know if Mr. Nightingale's feeling up to a snack, but there's a tray to go over to Mr. Villiers as usual. Oh, my dear God, Mr. Villiers. I forgot all about Mr. Villiers. Wexford stared at her. Do you mean to say Mr. Nightingale's brother-in-law lives in this house? Not to say lives, sir. He comes up every day to do his writing in the old house. And, oh, sir, I'll have to go and tell him. All I can say is, thank God they wasn't close. He won't take it hard. There's one blessing. She trotted off at a half-run. He allowed her 5 minutes, and then he followed the path she had taken. It led him into a little paved court in the centre of which was a small square pond. The court was heavily shaded by the trees which surrounded it. Mrs. Cantrip must have entered the ancient house by a black oak door which stood ajar. As he entered the house, Wexford became aware that the wind had dropped. Wexford ascended the stairs. From behind the single door at the top he heard low voices. He knocked. Mrs. Cantrip opened the door a crack and whispered, I've broke the news. Will you be wanting me any more? No, thank you, Mrs. Cantrip. She came out, her face very red. Wexford hesitated, and then he went into Villiers' writing room. The classics master turned a grave, cold face towards Wexford and said, Good morning, Chief Inspector. What can I do for you? This is a bad business, Mr. Villiers. I won't keep you long. Just a few questions, if you please. Certainly. Villiers' desk was a mass of papers. Open works of reference, ballpoint pens and empty cigarette packets. At one end stood a stack of new books, all identical to each other, and to the one Wexford had seen on Nightingale's bedside table, Wordsworth in Love by Dennis Villiers. Before sitting down, Wexford picked up the topmost of these books. He turned it over to eye the portrait of Villiers on the back of its jacket. It was a flattering photograph, or else taken long ago. The man who faced him had once, Wexford thought, been fair and handsome, strikingly like his dead sister, but time, or perhaps illness, had taken all that away. Men dying of cancer looked like Villiers. He was painfully thin, his mouth bloodless. I realize that this must have been a great shock to you, Wexford began. It seems unfortunate that no one broke the news to you earlier. Villiers' expression was unpleasant, supercilious. Frankly, he said, it makes very little difference. My sister and I weren't particularly attached to one another. We had nothing in common. My sister was an empty-headed, frivolous woman, and I am not an empty-headed, frivolous man. I believe you and your wife spent last evening at the Manor, Mr. Villiers. That is so. We played bridge. At 10:30 we left, drove home and went to bed. How did your sister seem last night, sir? Normal? Or did she appear excited? She was just as she always was, Chief Inspector, the gracious lady of the Manor, whom everyone loved. Her bridge, as always, was appalling. You knew she went for nocturnal walks in the forest? I knew she went for nocturnal walks in the grounds. Presumably it was because she was foolish enough to venture further that she met the end she did. Women on their own in lonely places do get murdered, or so I'm told. I never read the newspapers. Matters of that kind don't interest me. And you certainly made it clear that you disliked your sister. Strange under the circumstances that you should have been among those who accepted her bounty. I accepted my brother-in-law's, Chief Inspector. Here we are then, said Crocker, who was the police doctor and Wexford's friend. Elizabeth Nightingale was a well-nourished and extremely well-preserved woman of about 40. 41, said Wexford. A couple of rounds of beef sandwiches and a flask of coffee awaited him on the corner of his desk. Death, said the doctor, resulted from a fractured skull and multiple injuries to the brain. At least a dozen blows were struck by a not very blunt metal instrument. I don't mean an axe or a knife, but something with sharper edges to it, for instance, than a lead pipe or a poker. Death occurred, well, you know how hard it is to estimate, say, after 11 p.m. and before 1 a.m. Nothing's come of our search of the grounds of the forest so far, Burden said. What sort of a weapon had you in mind? Not my job, Mike, old boy, said Crocker. I just wouldn't have a clue. It would be a metal vase, or even a cooking utensil, or a fancy ashtray, or fire tongs, or a tankard. You think, said Wexford, munching scornfully, a fellow goes out in the wood to murder a woman armed with an egg whisk, does he? Or a saucepan? A bloke sees his wife carrying on with another man, so he whips out the carved silver vase he happens to have in his pocket and bops her over the head with it. You don't mean to say, said the doctor, shocked, that you've got Quentin Nightingale lined up for this job? But he's human, isn't he? He has passions. Frankly, I'd rather plump for that brother of hers, that Villiers, only he looks too ill to lift a knife and fork, let alone hit anyone with a frying pan. Wexford gazed thoughtfully at the doctor. I've been talking to Villiers, he said. He impressed me as a very sick man. Yellow skin, trembling hands, the lot. He's a patient of mine, said Crocker. And you, said Wexford sardonically, being a true priest of the medical confessional, are going to keep whatever's wrong with him locked up in your Hippocratic bosom. Well, I would, if there was anything to lock. Only it so happens that he's as fit as you are. Ain't that amazement? Wexford said. I thought it was cancer. But he must be some inner torment feeding on the damask cheek, like guilt. How old is he? 38? 38? Why, he looks 10 years older, and damn ill with it. Shock, said the doctor. What do you expect when a man hears his sister's been murdered? Just that, except that he evidently hated her guts. As nasty a piece of work as I've come across for a long time is Mr. Villiers. Come on, Mike. We're going to call on some ladies. Bryant drove them out of town. Their route lay past King's Markham Boys' Grammar School, more properly known as the King Edward VI Foundation for the sons of yeomen, burgesses, and those of the better sort. Burden, whose son had been admitted there 1 year before on passing a complex and subtle equivalent of the 11+, now said, That's where Villiers teaches. Latin and Greek are his subjects, aren't they? Burden nodded. He takes John for Latin. Those little devils call him Old Roman Villa. Good disciplinarian, I'd say. Wexford changed the subject. There are 3 main questions I'd like the answers to, he said. Why was Quentin Nightingale taking a bath at 5 in the morning, or conversely, why does he pretend he was? Why did Sean Lovell tell me he was watching a programme on the television last night that was, in fact, cancelled at the last moment? Why did Elizabeth Nightingale get on well with everybody except her only brother? Mike, we're coming to Clusterwell. Do you happen to know which house belongs to Villiers? Not yet. Wait a minute. Slow down, will you, Bryant? That's it, sir, standing by itself. Frowning a little, Wexford scanned the isolated bungalow. Needs a coat of paint, said Burden, shabby-looking dump. You think you could afford a decent garage? At one side, a long drive of cracked and pitted concrete led to a prefabricated asbestos garage with a roof of tarred felt. The Black Morris Minor stood on this drive, just in front of the asbestos doors, and someone had very recently cleaned it, for a small pool of water lay in the pothole under its rear bumper. That's odd, said Wexford. Your sister is murdered, and yet a couple of hours later you're lively enough to give your car a wash and brush up. Drive on, Bryant. We'll leave the Villiers in undisturbed domestic bliss a little longer. The first person they saw when they parked in Myfleet village was Katja Dawn. She giggled happily at them. Do you happen to know which is the Lovells' cottage, Miss Dawn? Burden asked her stiffly. Yes. Look, it is that one. She pointed, clutching the cringing inspector's arm. The most dirty in all the village. They are living like pigs, I think. His mother is a very nasty, dirty woman, all fat. Wexford smiled at her. Will the fat lady be at home, do you know? Katja ignored the smile. She was looking at Burden. Maybe, she said. You are liking a nice cup of tea? I think you are working very hard and would like some tea with me while your chief is in the dirty cottage. No. They are living like pigs, I think. His mother is a very nasty, dirty woman, all fat. Wexford smiled at her. Will the fat lady be at home, do you know? Katja ignored the smile. She was looking at Burden. Maybe, she said. You are liking a nice cup of tea? I think you are working very hard and would like some tea with me while your chief is in the dirty cottage. No, thank you, said Burden, appalled. Perhaps tomorrow, then, said Katja, sucking her hair. All evenings I am free, and tomorrow my friend must work late, serving drinks for the dance. Mind you are not forgetting. She wagged her finger at him. Now I say goodbye. Do not be catching anything nasty in that very dirty place. She tripped, straight-backed, yellow hair bobbing across the road and up to the manor gate. Wexford turned away laughing. Odds my little life, I think she means to tangle your eyes too. Not only the front gate, but the front door too was overgrown with nettles. Before they had a chance to lift the knocker, a grey lace curtain was lifted, at a lattice window and a face appeared. I don't know what you want, but you'll have to go round the back. The side gate fell over as they pushed it. With a shrug, Wexford laid it down flat on the luxuriant bed of weeds. The back garden was a squalid blot on a fair landscape, but a reasonably ship-shaped shed filled one of the farthest corners, and Wexford noticed that a gate in the back fence led directly into the forest. The back door opened suddenly, and the woman who had spoken to them from the window put her head out. Mrs. Lovell? That's right. What do you want? A word with you, if you please, Wexford said smoothly. We're police officers. She gave them a narrow, suspicious glance. But over there, is it? Come on. You can go in the lounge if you like. This room, euphemistically named, was slightly less dirty than the kitchen, but it too smelt of greens, a chronic gas leak, faintly of gin. There was a strong flavour of the gypsy in Mrs. Lovell's still handsome face, the aquiline nose, full curved lips and black eyes. The impression was that fat had crept upwards to cease at the neck. Her body was enormous, but not without a coarse attraction. "We're just making routine inquiries, Mrs. Lovell," Wexford said. "Would you mind telling me how your son spent last evening?" "Had his tea," she said. "Then he sat about watching the TV." "But he didn't watch it after 9:30, did he?" Mrs. Lovell looked from Wexford to Burden. It was transparent she was deciding whether to lie or tell the truth. "He went out." "Where'd he go?" "I never asked him. I don't interfere with his ways, and he don't interfere with mine. Maybe he went down the shed. Spends a lot of time down the shed, he does. His lordship's got his records down there." "What time did he come in?" "I never heard him. My gentleman friend came in about 7. Sean and him, they don't hit it off. I reckon that was why his lordship took himself off down the shed. He hadn't come in when my friend went. 10:30, that'd been. But there, like I say, I don't interfere with him, and he don't—" Yes, I see. Sean was very fond of Mrs. Nightingale, I believe." "You can believe what you like." Mrs. Lovell gave a huge yawn. "Her up the manor. She believed in interfering with folks, making them better themselves. Gave his lordship some funny ideas about getting into show business, singing and all that. I never took no notice. Maybe she fancied him. I never asked." "Would you have any objection if we searched this house?" She smiled, showing an unsuspected ironic humour. "Search all you like," she said. "Rather you than me." "A depressing existence," said Wexford as they returned to the car. "Never in all my years of CID work have I come across anything like it," Burden exploded. "I itch all over." He wriggled inside his clothes, scratching his head. "Those beds! That kitchen!" "More than I bargained for, I admit," Wexford agreed. "The only clean place was that shed. Odd that, Mike. A rug on the floor, a couple of decent chairs, a record player. Could be a love nest." Burden shuddered. "No one's ever going to make me believe a lady like Mrs. Nightingale would have assignations there." "Perhaps not," Wexford said reluctantly. "But what was Sean doing, Mike? Bryant checked on the pub and he wasn't there. The last bus out of my fleet goes at 9:20, so he wasn't on that. A boy like Sean Lovell doesn't traipse about admiring the beauties of nature." "Nobody," Burden persisted doggedly, "is going to make me believe that there was anything between him and Mrs. Nightingale. That mother of his is no more than the village trollop, if you ask me." "I thought you'd feel that way," said Wexford with a kindly smile, "and that's why I'm laying on something respectable for you. We're going to call on a virtuous wife, Mrs. Georgina Villiers, who will tell us, I hope, of her broken-hearted devotion to Mrs. Nightingale's memory. Just who her friends were, and what her nasty brother did to make them loathe each other." "My husband's gone back to the manor," said Georgina Villiers. "He won't be long." "We should like to talk to you." "Oh, would you?" Mrs. Villiers looked surprised and rather frightened. "Well, all right." She led them into a porridge-papered living room. It was as untidy and characterless as its owner, who stood awkwardly before saying in the abrupt voice of a charmless woman, "Well, sit down." "We shan't keep you long, Mrs. Villiers. How is your husband after this morning's shock?" "Oh, that. He's all right now." Wexford noticed that for so thin and slight a woman she had a strong athletic stride. Her legs, stockingless, were well muscled. "Oh. What did you want to ask me?" Her voice had a brusque, barking note. She seemed in her late 20s, a woman who didn't know how to make herself pretty but tried. The Edelweiss brooch on her blouse collar, the slide in her hair, showed that she tried. "My husband. You really should talk to my husband. He won't be long. Anyway, what did you want to ask me?" "First of all, Mrs. Villiers," said Burden, "did you and your husband come straight back here after your visit to the manor last night?" "Oh, yes." "You both went straight to bed?" "You'd been driving the car I saw outside," Wexford put in. Georgina Villiers shook her head violently. "We went in Dennis's car." "And yours, I see," said Wexford in a pleasant fatherly voice, "has just been cleaned. Always clean your car on Wednesday, do you, Mrs. Villiers? I expect you're like my wife. A special time of the week for every little chore, eh?" "No, I'm afraid not. I'm not methodical." She blinked at him. "Why do you ask?" "I'll tell you, Mrs. Villiers. If you always worked to a routine, you'd been conditioned to it, and then I could understand that even the violent death of your sister-in-law might not make you deviate from that routine. But since you aren't methodical, and only, I assume, clean your car when you feel like it, or when it needs it, why did you choose today of all days?" A fear that was almost anguish showed in her eyes. I don't know what you mean. I don't understand." "Perhaps you cleaned the car because you were upset. Was that it?" She was, Wexford thought, too frightened or too obtuse to see the loophole he was offering her. "I suppose you took the very sensible attitude that when one is unhappy or worried, work is the best thing to take one's mind off one's troubles." Relieved, she nodded. "Yes, that is it. I wasn't very upset, not really. I mean, she wasn't my sister." "That's true," said Wexford. "She was your husband's sister. Just a sister-in-law. They didn't like each other much, did they?" "No, they didn't. Dennis couldn't stand her." "Strange. Mrs. Nightingale seemed to get on with everybody else." "Did she?" "Oh, with the county people, you mean? Elizabeth didn't have any real friends. My husband, he thinks she was killed by a maniac. I expect that's what it was. She must have been mad, going into the forest at night. Really, she was asking for it." "Perhaps," Wexford said. "Do you know why your husband didn't get on with his sister?" "Well, they didn't have anything in common. I suppose he thought her rather silly and extravagant." "And was she, Mrs. Villiers? She had a lot of money, didn't she?" "You got on well with them?" "Quinn was always kind." Georgina Villiers twisted her husband are great friends, but I think he got to like me for myself. Anyway," she said suddenly shrill and cross, "why should I care? A man's wife ought to come first. He ought to think more of her than of outsiders. Not go and do his work in somebody else's house." "I was a teacher of physical education," she said proudly, "before I was married. But I've given it up for good. Don't you think a woman ought to stay at home and look after her husband?" Frowning at Burden, who was nodding his head approvingly, Wexford said, "Would you object if we searched this house?" Georgina shook her head. The bungalow had another reception room and 2 bedrooms, the smaller of which was unfurnished and uncarpeted. "I wonder what he does with his money," Wexford whispered. "There's nothing here that could conceivably have been used as a weapon." They moved into the kitchen, where Wexford lifted the lid of the old-fashioned cake boiler. "Blazing away merrily," he said. "They could have burnt practically anything in here, and she's had hours to do it in." Georgina was waiting for them in the living room. "I can't think why my husband's so long. You'd think that today he'd want to be here with me. You'd think—" Suddenly she froze, listening intently. "It is now." She leapt from the chair and rushed into the hall, slamming the door behind her. Burton said, "Oh, she's certainly a mass of nerves. It's almost as if she expected us to find something. I wonder if—" "Shh," said Wexford sharply. Dennis Villiers walked into the room, talking over his shoulder to his wife. "I can't be in two places at once, Georgina. Went's in a bad way. I left him with Lionel Marriott." Burton's eyes met Wexford's. The Chief Inspector got up. "Did I hear you mention the name Lionel Marriott?" "I expect so. Why, do you know him?" "He teaches," said Wexford, "the same school as you do. As a matter of fact, his nephew is married to my elder daughter. Is he a friend of your brother-in-law?" "He hangs about the manor from time to time." It was a great piece of luck, Wexford thought, that by serendipity he had lighted on one of Quentin Nightingale's cronies, and that crony was Lionel Marriott. It had never crossed his mind to connect Marriott and the manor, although perhaps it should have done. For what great house in the whole neighbourhood was closed to him? What person with any pretensions to culture or taste wasn't on hobnobbing terms with him? Marriott himself came to the door. Natalie, in a red velvet jacket, a can of asparagus tips in one hand. "Dear old boy, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. You'll stay for my party, won't you? Just a little celebration of you old friends." Wexford found himself swept into Marriott's drawing-room. "What are you celebrating?" "Perhaps celebrate was the wrong word, dear old boy. This party is more in the nature of an I, who am about to die, salute you gathering. This is the last night of the holidays, and it's back to the spotty devils tomorrow." "Of course," Wexford said, and he remembered now that Marriott always gave an end-of-the-holidays party. "I won't stay, though. I see that I was wrong in supposing you to have been a close friend of Elizabeth Nightingale." Marriott's mobile face fell. I know, I should be in mourning, sackcloth and ashes no less, but suppose I were to put all these dear people off and fling the baked meats to the Pomfret broiler pig farm, what good would it do? Would it bring her back?" "I suppose not." "Dear Reg, I can't bear your censure. Let me give you a drink. A whisky, a Pernod, a champagne cocktail, and a little slice of cold duck to go with it." Overwhelmed as usual, Wexford sat down. "Just a small whisky, then, but nothing to eat." Marriott began pouring huge measures of that 69 into cut-glass tumblers. The clatter of heels told Wexford there was a third person in the house, and as he took his triple whisky, the woman appeared. She was a tall blonde of about 45 with charm bracelets on both wrists. "This is Hypatia, my amanuensis," said Marriott, seizing her arm. "This is Chief Inspector Wexford, my dear, the guardian of our peace." Hypatia extended a large, calm hand. "She won't interfere with us," said Marriott, as if she wasn't there. "She's just going to have a bath and make herself more beautiful than ever. Run along, Patty darling." "I want to know about the Nightingales. Anything you can tell me." He grinned. "I know you won't let yourself be inhibited by any foolish scruples like good taste, or not speaking ill of the dead." "I was fond of Elizabeth," said Marriott in a slightly offended tone. "We had known each other all our lives. We were infants together, in a manner of speaking." "A manner of stretching, more like," said Wexford nastily. "She could have given you a good 15 years. The offended tone. "We had known each other all our lives. We were infants together, in a manner of speaking." "A manner of stretching, more like," said Wexford nastily. "She could have given you a good 15 years. "So you've known her since she was born, have you? Where was that?" "Here, of course. She and Dennis were born here, in a nasty little damp house down by Kingsbrook Lock. Their father was a clerk in the council office. Poorest church mice. Elizabeth and Dennis went to the council school, and no doubt he would have gone on wasting his sweetness on the desert air but for one of that stick of bombs a German plane let fly over here on its way to the coast. It took Villiers père and mère to Kingdom Come. Where were the children? Dennis was out fishing and Elizabeth had been sent to fetch him home. Elizabeth and Dennis were 14 and 11 respectively. What became of them? A most unfair arrangement was made for them, said Marriott. Dennis went to his mother's brother, a barrister, and he sent Dennis to public school and then Oxford. Poor Elizabeth was left behind with her father's sister, who took her away from high school when she was 15 and sent her to work at Moran's, the drapers. Wexford's face registered the astonishment Marriott had hoped for. Mrs. Nightingale, the draper's assistant? I thought that would shake you. How did she meet Nightingale? Oh, that was a long time later, said Marriott. Elizabeth ran away to London and got a job, the clever little thing. Did the brother and sister meet in London? That I wouldn't know. I didn't see either of them again until I heard Quentin had bought the manor. How did the Nightingales get on? They were a very happy couple. If you and your wife never discuss anything but the weather, are weighted on hand and foot, are childless and equally cold sexually, what is there to quarrel about? May I ask you how you know they were sexually cold? Marriott shifted a little. Well, you've only got to look at Quentin, and you must allow for a little guesswork, Reg. I'll do the guessing. Let's get back to those early days, 15, 16 years ago. Was Villiers living here then? No, he turned up a couple of years later. First day of the autumn term it was, and that makes it 14 years ago, almost to the day. What a stroke of luck for you, I said, knowing me. I can take you around and introduce you to anyone who is anyone. You'd have thought it had been overjoyed, but not a bit of it. He just gave me one of those sick looks. But I thought I'd better make allowances. Allowances? For what? Well, he's a poet, as you know, and poets are curious creatures. Several very charming little verses of his had appeared in the New Statesman by that time, and I'd just read his collection of essays on the Lake Poets. Most scholarly. So, as I say, I made allowances. Perhaps you're relying on your sister to give you an entree, I said. Don't forget, she's new here herself. My sister here, he said, going quite white. Christ, I thought this was the last place she'd want to show her face in. But you made sure they got together, said Wexford. Naturally, my dear. I had Dennis and his wife up there the same evening. His wife? Wexford almost shouted. But he's only been married a year. His first wife, June, a most— Look, don't let's get on to her yet, groaned Wexford. Why was Villiers so upset when you said his sister was here? I asked myself the same thing at the time, but we were all together quite a lot after that, and it was plain they couldn't stand each other. She acted towards him as if he'd done her some injury, and as for him, well, the man's rudeness to her was beyond belief. But Dennis is foul to everyone except Quentin. He's quite different with Quen, and of course Quen adores him. But Elizabeth and Dennis were never friends. As children they were always quarrelling. Wexford fixed Marriott with a searching look, and would have pursued this further but for the entry of Hypatia, dressed in gold trousers and a black and gold tunic. Still nattering? Pam and Ian are here, Leo. I've just seen their car turn into the alley, and she said pointedly to Wexford, Must you go? Wexford got up, shaking off Marriott's restraining hand. I'll pick you up from school tomorrow. Lovely. said Marriott, showing a vague uneasiness. Burden arrived breathless in Wexford's office. The chief inspector sat at his rosewood desk. Standing behind him at the window was the doctor, breathing on the glass and drawing with one finger. "Sorry I'm late," said Burden. "My girl Pat is always sick on the first day of term, so I hung about and drove her to school." Wexford looked up with a scowl. "I've got some lab reports here, Mike. The ash from the manor bonfire shows distinctly that woolen cloth was burnt on it. No weapon, too." Wexford looked up with a scowl. "I've got some lab reports here, Mike. The ash from the manor bonfire shows distinctly that woolen cloth was burnt on it. No weapon has come to light." "It could be anywhere," Burden said hopelessly. "We don't even know what it is." "No, but we're all going to have a hard think about that. First of all, we're going to have to decide if Mrs. Nightingale's assailant planned this murder or if it was unpremeditated." Dr. Crocker sat down. "Premeditated," said the doctor. "Otherwise she wouldn't have been killed in that way in that place. The kind of thing she was killed with isn't the kind that people carry with them on country walks." "Does it have to be a man?" Wexford asked. "A man? Or a very strong woman?" "I agree with you. My view is that it was planned, and that can still apply in a jealousy murder. The killer followed her, expecting to see what he did in fact see. He took the weapon with him, guessing what he was going to see and only waiting for confirmation. What do you think, Mike?" "Unpremeditated," said Burden coolly. "Our murderer was carrying with him something that could be used as a murder weapon but had some other primary purpose." "Well, what do people carry when they go into the wood at night?" "A walking stick," said Burden promptly, "with a metal tip." Crocker shook his head. "Too thin. A shooting stick, possibly, but it seems far-fetched." "A golf club." Wexford glared at him derisively. "Going to have a few drives among the trees, was he?" "Well, it was moonlight," said the doctor. "Or it was till the wind came up." "You said something just now, something about moonlight." "Oh, yes. I remember because I was out of Flackford, delivering a baby. There was a bright moon, but the clouds were already coming up by 11, and by past the moon had gone." A slow grin spread across Wexford's face. "So, what would anyone take with him into the wood?" Burden said, his gravity giving way to excitement. "A torch." "A torch," said Quentin Nightingale. "Those we have are kept in the garden room." "Where is the garden room?" "I'll take you there." And as they re-entered the hall, the front door bell rang. Mrs. Cantrip marched out from the kitchen. "Whoever's that now?" she said with some exasperation. It was Georgina Villiers and Lionel Marriott. Georgina carried a canvas hold-all with plastic straps and handles and broke into a disjointed stream of apology and explanation. "I felt I had to come and see how you were bearing up, Gwen. I brought my own lunch so that Mrs. Cantrip won't be bothered cooking for me. How are you? You do look bad. Oh dear. Perhaps I shouldn't have come." "Oh no. It was nice of you to take the trouble. Won't you come into the morning room?" He half turned to Wexford. "Perhaps Mrs. Cantrip can take you to where the torches are kept." "One moment," said Wexford, putting out an arm to prevent Marriott from following them. The morning room door was closed. "What the hell are you doing here? I thought you were supposed to be at school." "I had a free period, my dear, and how to use it better than popping up here to console poor Quen? Georgina gave me a lift. I was standing at the school gates, wondering how I was going to accomplish my popping, the My-Fleet bus having just gone, when along she came, manner bound. Such a relief. We had a nice little chat, planning the things we were going to say to cheer Quen up. Then you'd better go in and say them, said Wexford. Say them and go. I'm just about to start another massive search of this place, and I don't want a lot of cheerful, nosy people interfering with my men. And don't forget, he added, that we have a date at 4 o'clock. Now, Mrs. Cantrip, for the garden room. Just down this passage, sir, and mind the step. It's dark down here, Mrs. Cantrip. I'm always telling Mr. Nightingale to have a light fixed up. There was quite a nasty accident 5 or 6 years back, when that Toohey fell down the steps. He'd been too free helping himself from Mr. Nightingale's whisky bottle, and that's a fact. Who was Toohey? Asked Wexford. A servant. Him and his wife used to work here, if you can call it work. I was never so relieved in all my life as when Mr. Nightingale sacked them. This is the garden room, sir. And there's a bit more light. You'll be glad to see. The light came from a glazed door leading into the garden. Wexford looked slowly round. Its walls were whitewashed, and on one of them hung a couple of shotguns, while beneath golf clubs and walking sticks lay in a long rack. His glance went up to a shelf above the rack, on which stood an array of torches. Mrs. Cantrip. There should be another one, a great big silver-coloured one. Suddenly, she had become rather pale. I reckon it'd be 9 or 10 inches long. When did you last see it there? Oh, it'd be 2 or 3 weeks back. You don't kind of clean a room like this, if you take my meaning, sir. Young Sean gives it a sweep out every so often. He does he? Wexford looked at the surface of the shelf. A thickish pattern of dust lay on the unpainted wood. In the front was a dust-free circle some 4 inches in diameter. Giving himself carte blanche to explore the house all he pleased, Wexford looked into the drawing-room and the dining-room, and found both empty. He mounted the stairs to the first landing and peered out between the crimson velvet curtains. Georgina Villiers was standing on the lawn, munching sandwiches and talking to Will Palmer. There was no sign of Quentin Nightingale. Wexford went down again and entered the empty study and telephoned Burton. He put the receiver down and listened to the silence. At first it seemed absolute. Then, from far above him, he made out faintly thin, reedy music from a transistor. Catcher, perhaps. Then footsteps, coming from he couldn't tell where, but which brought Quentin Nightingale into the room. A torch is missing from the garden room, Wexford said. A big torch, shaped like this. Using both hands, he drew it in the air. Have you seen it about lately? It was there on Sunday. I went in to get my golf clubs, and I noticed it was there. Isn't there now? That torch killed your wife, Mr. Nightingale. Quentin leaned against a bookcase and put his head in his hands. I don't honestly think I can take any more. I can understand that. But Quentin seemed not to have heard him. I think I'm going mad, he said. I must have been mad to do what I did. I'd give everything I have to go back on Tuesday evening and start again. Are you making me some sort of confession? Wexford asked him sternly. Because if so... No, not that sort of confession. Quentin almost shouted. Something private. Something... He threw up his head. Show me, he said hoarsely. Show me where you think this torch ought to be. They walked down the dark passage, Wexford going first. Ahead of them a vertical slit of light showed the garden-room door slightly ajar. I closed that door, Wexford said sharply and pushed it wide. On the shelf, where there'd been only a clean circular patch in the dust, stood a large chrome torch upended. The torch had been scrubbed, probably immersed in water. Very slowly, Wexford said, "Come. Let us go back to your study." The widower sank heavily into a chair and covered his face with his hands. "Did you replace that torch, Mr. Nightingale?" There was a tap on the door, and Wexford opened it to admit Burden. A quick glance passed between them. "Pull yourself together, Mr. Nightingale," Wexford said. "I'm waiting for an answer." "Very well," he said at last. "Since I don't believe in wasting time, I'll tell you a story. You may find some parallels in it with your own conduct over the past days. There was a country gentleman," he began, "who lived with his beautiful wife in a manor house. They were happy together, even if their marriage might have been said to have grown a little dull with the years. One day he discovered that his wife was being unfaithful to him, meeting another man in the woods at night. So, consumed with jealousy, he followed her, taking a torch with him. The night was dark. He saw her with this man, and when the man had left, her husband confronted her and struck out at her again and again in his jealous frenzy until he had beaten her to death." Quentin managed a strangled, However it happened, it wasn't that way." "No?" "The husband didn't burn his blood-stained sweater on the still smouldering bonfire. He didn't pace the garden for hours in his anguish, finally lock himself in his own bathroom to spend more hours cleansing every trace of his wife's blood from his person. Strange. We know he took a bath, and that at what some would call an ungodly hour." "Stop!" Quentin cried. He cleared his throat. "I didn't take a bath." A fiery blush coloured Quentin's face. "I'll tell you where I was," he said. "But you alone." Wexford made a quick decision. "Will you wait outside, please, Inspector Burden?" Obediently, Burden went. Quentin gave a heavy sigh. "I want you to know that it was quite correct what you said about my wife and me, being happy together, I mean. But with our marriage grown dull with the years, I thought it inevitable with people who had been married as long as we had, and had no children. We never quarrelled. People who had been married as long as we had, and had no children. We never quarrelled. If my wife had fallen in love with someone else, I shouldn't have been angry. I expect I would have been jealous, but I wouldn't have shown my jealousy by violence. God forbid. Or in any other way." The man's words were simple and frank, carrying, Wexford thought, an unmistakable ring of truth. "I have to tell you about my private life to make you understand why I did what I did. I used to go to her once a fortnight, always on a Saturday night. She would push back the bed covers and say, always the same, 'This is nice, darling.' And afterwards, when I left her to go back to my room, she'd say, 'That was lovely, darling.' She never called me by my name. Sometimes I think she forgot what it was." "I was so lonely," Quentin said. "Sometimes I used to feel I was married to a doll that smiled and wore pretty clothes, and even had a vocabulary of a certain limited kind." "And yet you were happy?" Wexford ventured quietly. "Did I say that?" "Perhaps because everyone else said I was, I grew used to telling myself that I must be. I suppose I was attracted to Katja from the start. It's almost impossible for me to find the words to tell you You slept with her," Wexford said expressionlessly. Quentin nodded. "The night before last. That wasn't the first time. Chief Inspector, in all the 16 years we'd been married, I'd never been unfaithful to my wife until Katja came. Then for the first time I saw a woman who was close to me behaving like a woman. One night I was lying in bed, I never remember feeling such a depth of loneliness as I felt that night. I thought I'd give everything I possessed if Elizabeth would just come into my room and sit on the bed and talk to me. Presently I heard her come upstairs, he said. Her bedroom door closed and I heard her begin to run a bath. In that moment I forgot who I was, my age, my position, my duty to my wife. I put on my dressing gown and went upstairs. Katja was sitting up in bed reading a magazine. I didn't speak a word. She smiled at me and put out her arms. There were, well, other times. Not many. There was the night before last. I went up to Katja at about 11:15. I stayed with her all night. It was Palmer walking about on the floor below that awakened me. I sensed something was wrong, so I got up and dressed and found him on the terrace. "Pity you didn't tell us all this before," Wexford said, frowning. "This will have to be corroborated, Mr. Nightingale." Wexford went upstairs. A soft, throaty voice was singing the #1 song in the pop charts, singing of love. A passionate longing, bitter and savage, to recapture for 1 hour the youth he had lost, engulfed Wexford. And suddenly growing old seemed the only tragedy in life. He came to the door and rapped on it sharply, and she came to the door and let him in. Her pink dress had white frills like a nightgown, and like a nightgown, it was cut low to show milk-white half-moons, and shoulders where even the bones looked soft. She smiled at him, her sea-blue eyes full of laughter. "Please sit down, Miss Dawn," he said, surprised that his voice was steady and sane. "And would you turn that radio off?" She complied, still smiling. "I have some questions to ask you," he said, "about your relations with Mr. Nightingale. He's your lover, isn't he?" "He has said this?" "Yes." "Oh, poor Quentin. He does not want anyone to know at all. Must be kept very secret thing, and now you have found out. I'm afraid I must ask you to tell me about it. Just tell me everything that happened between you. No, not everything." An incredulous smile had widened her eyes. "Simply how it began, and so all right?" She giggled with pure pleasure. "This is always nice, I think, to talk about love. It is 4 or 5 weeks now. I am in my bed, and there is a knock, and it is Quentin. I am thinking how he is kind, with nice manners, and thin, straight body. And I am forgetting he is older than my father in Holland. And also I know he is a lonely man, married to a frigid, cold woman. So we are making love very soon, and all is different. For when he is in my bed, he is not old any more." She said this triumphantly, pointing to the bed. "There were other occasions?" "Of course. He is liking me as much as I am liking him. The next week and the next week, and then the night before last." "How long did he stay with you?" "All night," said Katja airily. "I tell him that just before I come in I see Mrs. Nightingale go into the wood, and he is saying very, very sadly, 'She does not want me. She has never wanted me.' But I say, 'I want you, Quentin.' And so he stay all night. But he is going away very early in the morning because he is hearing the old gardener man walk about." Wexford said, "At what time did you see Mrs. Nightingale cross the road?" 2 minutes after 11, Katja said promptly. "And at what time did Mr. Nightingale pay you his nocturnal visit?" 15 minutes after 11. "How can you be so sure of the time?" I was wearing my new watch, and always I am looking at it." She waved her left wrist at him. "This, my friend, is giving me for my birthday, and all the time I look at it." Burden listened with disdain and incredulity to Wexford's account of his 2 interviews. It aroused in him a cold disgust. "I cannot see," he said, standing by the window in Wexford's office, "why you suppose this story of theirs lets them out at all. On the contrary, they could have been in it together." "Oh? Just what would she get out of being an accessory to the murder of her employer's wife?" Burden stared at him. "Get out of it? Marriage with Nightingale, of course." "Don't keep saying of course. It's far from of course. What reason have we to suppose Catcher wants to marry Nightingale? For all her immorality, as you'd put it, she's a nice, normal girl who'd recoil in horror from the thought of taking into her bed a man fresh from murdering his wife. Like, times have changed. Young women don't look on marriage as the be-all and end-all of existence anymore. And as for Catcher wanting him for his money, I don't think she's given much thought to the money yet. There are 2 lines to pursue, it seems to me. Who was Mrs. Nightingale's lover? Who had access to that torch? You've had a lab report on it. Wexford nodded. There were traces of blood of the same group as Mrs. Nightingale's. AB negative. Well, who did have access to it? Who could have replaced it this morning? Wexford counted them off on his fingers. Nightingale, Catcher, Mrs. Cantrip, Will Palmer, Sean Lovell, Georgina Villiers, and Lionel Marriott. Quite a list. We might also include Villiers, as Georgina could have replaced it for him. Now, what about Sean? She was old enough to be his mother, said Burden. Wexford laughed. My God, Mike, you don't know what life's about, do you? It's because he was 20 and she 40 that he would have an affair with her. Wexford parked 100 yards up the road from the school gates. Dennis Villiers came out in his dark blue Anglia. He sounded his horn repetitively to clear boys out of the road. He turned his head and saw Marriott trotting out of the main gate. When the little man had passed the car, he wound down the window and hissed, A frightful fiend doth close behind you tread. Marriott jumped, collected himself, and smiled. A very overrated poem, I've always thought, he said, and got into the car. Do let's rush, ducky, and get ourselves huge drinks. I suppose you'll want me to go on with the next instalment on the way. I can't wait, said Wexford. Where have I got to? Villiers' first wife. June, said Marriott. She didn't like me. Oh, dear, no. She had a sociology degree, and she'd been some kind of probation officer. She and Dennis had a dreadful flat over the pet food shop in Queen Street. Stink of putrefying horseflesh, my dear, and June's funny friends all over the place. Crowds of them there every evening, all very earnest and wanting to put the world right. Whenever there's a rumpus in Grosvenor Square, I look very closely at the pictures, I can tell you, because I'm positive I'm going to see her face there one of these days. Good God, no. Dennis divorced her, or she divorced him, I forget which. Heaven knows why they got married in the first place. She didn't like Quen and Elizabeth, and she took a very dim view of Dennis going up to the manor so much. If he didn't care for his sister, why did he go so much? Well, he and Quen got on together from the word go. Anyway, Dennis must have complained to Quen about how impossible it was to work in his home atmosphere, and Quen offered him the old house to write in. Well, as I said, June didn't at all care for Dennis working at the manor, so finally she walked out on him, leaving him to his ménage à trois. What a funny way of putting it. Still, no doubt, there was a triangular element there. It always used to fascinate me when I went up there to see Dennis and Quen utterly immersed in each other. Books, 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 my dear, and a positively ringing exchange of Wordsworth quotes, the two of them groaning that they had thoughts which do often lie too deep for tears, and all the time poor Elizabeth sat there reading Vogue, and not a word to say for herself. "I dare say you found something to chat to her about," said Wexford. "I never met anyone who knew so much about, what shall I say, current trivia." "Really, Red, you are unkind. I'll have you know, Elizabeth wasn't at all an empty-headed woman, just as intelligent as Dennis in her way. She took an active part in county life, you know, organising things and sitting on committees, and she spent hours every day making herself look lovely. She did the flowers and a bit of gardening." "Is that so?" Wexford interrupted. "In the hothouse, maybe with young Sean Lovell." "She was fond of Sean. I met her once coming out of the record shop in the High Street. She'd been buying the #1 pop single in the charts. 'I must keep up with my little songbird,' she said. 'Really, he's the only true nightingale in my fleet.' Quite witty, I thought." "An extraordinary remark to make," said Wexford. "Oh, I don't know. You read too much into things, my dear. All you policemen are terribly salacious. Sean used to stand under Elizabeth's window and serenade her. I suppose she was flattered, and it made her feel young. It was a case of heroine worship on one side and a sort of flattered acceptance on the other." My Fleet was a pretty village, even on a winter's day. Now, bathed in mellow sunshine, it lay in its hollow beneath the forest like a sleeping beauty. This afternoon it seemed unpeopled. Only the flowers in cottage gardens stood out in the open enjoying the sun. Burden drove to the King's Market in worship on one side and a sort of flattered acceptance on the other. My Fleet was a pretty village, even on a winter's day. Now, bathed in mellow sunshine, it lay in its hollow beneath the forest like a sleeping beauty. This afternoon it seemed unpeopled. Only the flowers in cottage gardens stood out in the open enjoying the sun. Burden drove to the King's Markham end and decided to walk the rest of the way. But he had been wrong in thinking the village totally deserted. Now, as he approached the manor, he noticed Mrs. Lovell leaning over the gate of her disreputable cottage, talking to a swarthy man in a cap who carried 2 dead and bleeding rabbits over his arm. He found Sean in the old house, unloading apples from a basket onto one of the racks. The boy was whistling, but he stopped abruptly when Burden came in. "Come here often, do you?" Burden asked softly. "Is this where you used to meet Mrs. Nightingale?" "Me?" He gave Burden a sullen glare, sat down on a stack of silver birch logs, and began to roll a cigarette. "May I help?" he said. "If I knew what she was getting at." "No, I don't come here often. Fact is, I never set foot in here since April." He cocked a thumb at the tunnel staircase. "On account of him being up there. Me and old Palmer, we've got strict orders not to come in here disturbing him, see?" "You go into the garden room, though, don't you? Ever borrowed a torch, Lovell, to light your way when you went to Mrs. Nightingale in the forest?" "Me?" Sean said again. "Are you off your nut? You're trying to make out that I was carrying on with Mrs. Nightingale? You are a nut, and a dirty-minded nut at that." "All right, that'll do," said Burden, mortally offended. "Come now. You were on very friendly terms with her." "Look," said Sean, "if you must know, she was interested in helping me with my career, music, the scene, up there in London." His face had grown rapt, and like Dick Whittington, he seemed to see a vision. "I got to get there." His voice shook. "I know it all, see? There's not one of them DJs knows half of what I do." Suddenly he shouted at Burden, "Take that grin off your face! You're just ignorant like the rest of them. Like my old lady with her men and her booze." Mrs. Nightingale was the only one as understood. "And she's dead." He drew a dirty sleeve across his eyes. The artist manqué that the world persists in treating as an artisan. Gentler this time, Burden said, "What was Mrs. Nightingale going to do for you?" "There's a bloke in London she knew," Sean said, muttering now. "He was with the BBC, and she promised faithfully she'd mention my name. Maybe for singing. Maybe for a DJ in a small way for a start," he added humbly. "Got to start in a small way," he sighed. "I don't know what'll happen to me now." "Best stick to your gardening, grow up a bit, and get rid of some of those fancy ideas," Burden said. Sean's glance of pure hatred riled him. "Why did you tell the Chief Inspector you were watching a television program when that program wasn't even shown?" "I'd been watching the telly," he said. "But I got fed up. My old lady had got her bloke in for the evening, that Alf Tawney. One fellow after another my mum's had, ever since I was a kid, and all they ever wanted is to get me out of the way. I tell you, when I was about 10, I saw my mum with one of those men of hers kissing and pawing each other, and I picked up a carving knife and I went for her. I'd have killed her, I would. Only the bloke got the knife away and hit me." Something he saw in Burden's eyes silenced him. Awkwardly he said, "I don't care any more. Not about her. Only I get fed up. I said I was 10, didn't I? I'm not like that now. I wouldn't lay a finger on her, whatever she did." "I take it," said Burden, "you're referring to your mother." "Who else I'd be referring to?" Burden shrugged lightly. "So you got fed up with your mother and Alf Tawney. Where did you go?" "In my shed," said Sean. "I sat there all alone, just thinking and listening." Very softly he began whistling again. His face had coloured as vivid a red as the apples. Getting up to leave, Burden wondered why. "Dennis always went on holiday with them," said Marriott. "With both of them, I mean. But 2 years ago he had to go with Elizabeth alone. Gwen caught the measles, poor thing. Well, they must have rowed the whole time, because they both looked rotten when they got back, and there was a distinct coldness between Dennis and Gwen all the following winter, and Dennis stopped going to the manor. Then one day, in the June of the summer before last, I was up at the manor when in walked Dennis. 'You're a stranger,' Gwen said, but I could tell he was overjoyed. 'I only came,' said Dennis, 'to tell you I can't go to Rome with you next month. I've promised the head I'll be one of the escorts to the school party.' You! I almost screamed. You must be out of your mind. I mean, it's a joke at school, the lengths the staff go to get out of it. You'd pass up lovely Rome, I said, for the lousy Costa Brava. 'I'm going,' he said. 'It's all fixed.' And you should have seen poor Gwen's face. He did his best to work on Dennis, but it was no use. He was adamant." "What about this year, Lionel?" "He was married by then, wasn't he? Met Georgina on the Costa Brava. No, this year they went off to Bermuda by themselves, and I think secretly they were only too glad to have got rid of old Misery-Face. Elizabeth said as much to me when I went up there to witness her will, and—" "Her what?" said Wexford slowly. "Did you say her will?" "Why didn't I tell you that my wife had made a will?" "Frankly, Chief Inspector, because I'd forgotten all about it." Quentin Nightingale had seemed bewildered at first, but now he smiled a slightly derisory smile, as if at someone making a mountain out of a molehill. "I don't for a moment suppose it's legal. It was just a piece of nonsense my wife took into her head, you know." "No, I don't know," said Wexford. "I imagine that people in your position have solicitors draw up their wills for them." "Who is your solicitor, Mr. Nightingale?" "But no solicitor was involved. I told you it was just a piece of nonsense. It was last summer. My wife and I had decided on Bermuda for our holiday, and naturally we intended to fly. She didn't like flying, and we usually went on holiday by sea and car." "She was afraid to fly?" "Oh, come. Afraid is putting it too strongly. She was a little anxious, but she was quite prepared to joke about it. This will was a sort of a joke. I told you I never took it seriously. I doubt if it was even witnessed." "One person witnessed it," said Wexford. "Lionel Marriott." Quentin raised his eyes, and there was genuine surprise in them. "Mr. Nightingale, what became of this piece of paper your wife was scribbling on?" "She gave it to me and asked me to put it in my safe." "And did you?" "Oh, yes, I did." "Is it still there?" "I suppose so," Quentin said wonderingly. "I told you I forgot all about it, and I imagined Elizabeth did too when we got back safe and sound." Wexford said heavily, "I'll trouble you to open that safe now, sir, if you please." Eyeing Wexford, as if he thought he was dealing with a lunatic who needed to be humoured, Quentin opened his safe to reveal a space about the size of a large biscuit tin. The safe contained a stack of papers which Wexford supposed to be share certificates and personal documents, and several leather jewel boxes. Quentin held out to Wexford a long brown envelope. "It's in there," he said. "May I?" Wexford's tone left no room for refusal. He slit open the envelope and drew out a sheet of expensive blue writing paper. The paper was covered with a bold, rather masculine handwriting. Wexford turned it over, glanced at the foot of the reverse side, and said in his strong official voice, "This is a perfectly legal will, sir. Nonetheless valid and binding because it was not made on a will form or in the presence of a lawyer." "Good heavens," said Quentin. "It is witnessed by Myrtle Annie Cantrip and Lionel Hepburn Marriott, and correctly signed by your wife. You'd find yourself up against a great deal of trouble if you tried to contest it. But I don't want to contest it. I think you'd better read it before you commit yourself, Mr. Nightingale." "What does it say?" Quentin's face was now utterly bewildered. "Will you read it to me, Mr. Wexford?" "Very well. This is the last will and testament of me, Elizabeth Frances Nightingale, born Villiers, being of sound mind. This is my last will and revokes all other wills made by me. I leave all my money, including the money my husband invested for me, to Sean Arthur Lovell of 2 Church Cottages, Myfleet, in the county of Sussex, in the hope that he will use it in the furtherance of his ambition." "Good heavens," Quentin said again. "Good heavens. And all the personal jewellery I possess to my sister-in-law, Georgina Villiers, of 55 Kings Markham Road, Clusterwell, so that she may indulge her love of adornment, although, as a virtuous woman, her price is above rubies." "Elizabeth wrote that?" Quentin asked in a hollow voice. "Yes, sir." They were both surprised, Wexford thought, but probably for different reasons. For his part, he was astonished that the woman whom her brother had described as frivolous and empty-headed should have had the wit to compose it and the knowledge to give it that malevolent bite. Quentin's astonishment stemmed perhaps from the malevolence alone. "Is that all?" he asked. "That's all." "How much money did your wife leave, sir?" "Oh, nothing to speak of." Quentin forced a laugh. It was overdrawn, as a matter of fact, on her private account. There's about £300 that I invested for her years ago. I'm sure you won't grudge that to young Lovell. Is something troubling you, sir? No. Well, Mrs. Villiers, said Wexford thoughtfully, is a lady who seems fond of jewellery, as your wife pointed out. Let us hope that there are a few nice pieces for her. A few nice pieces? Quentin suddenly sprang to his feet. My wife's jewellery is in those boxes. He plunged his hands into the safe. At a rough estimate, he said, I'd value it at £30,000. There was a short silence, and then Wexford said, You evidently didn't know of your wife's friendship with Sean Lovell. I knew she had a maternal interest in him. She asked me to get a friend of mine at the BBC to hear him sing, and I wasn't too keen, but I will now. It's the least thing, and the last thing I can do for her. Forgive me, you never suspected the interest might be more than maternal. Quentin screwed up his face in distaste, shaking his head violently. Oh, God, he said. There can't have been. But if there was, I have no right to sit in judgment, not while I and Catcher... Mr. Wexford, I don't understand all these undercurrents. I don't understand any of it. Nor do I, said Wexford grimly. Meanwhile, Burden was making discoveries of his own. Emerging from the old house courtyard, he encountered Mrs. Cantrip, coming from the kitchen garden with a bunch of parsley in her hand. Oh, you startle me, sir, she said. You walk so soft. Would you like a cup of tea? Getting a bit late for that, isn't it? Said Burden, looking at his watch, and seeing that it was 5:30. When do you knock off, anyway? Supposed to be at 4, and that's a fact. But we're all at 6s and 7s these days. Come on, sir, do. It'll do you good. And there's Will waiting to have a word with you. In the kitchen, Will Palmer sat at the table next to the man Burden had observed earlier talking over her gate to Mrs. Lovell. As soon as he saw Burden, Palmer got to his feet. Got something to show you, Governor. With an air of triumph, Palmer produced from under the table a wet polythene bag, its neck fastened with garden twine. Burden undid the string and pulled out a piece of material. It was dampish, but not wet, and it was still plainly recognizable as a silk scarf. Across the centre was a long brown stain. Burden frowned. Where did you find this? In a hole in the oak, way down Cleaver's Vale. I was by way of clearing that old fungus from the oak when I come on this hole, see? Likely an owl made it, squirrel, said the other man laconically. Or squirrel, as I was going to say, Alf, said Palmer, ruffled. This hole would be about 6 feet up, I reckon. Level with the top of my head, it was. Rot, said the swarthy man. Palmer glared at him. Cut a long story short, I stuck my hand in this hole, and that's what I found. What's in that bag? In the bag? It wasn't in no bag, Governor. Just rolled up and stuffed down the hole. Have you ever seen it before? Of course he has, said Mrs. Cantrip. It belonged to poor Mrs. Nightingale. She bent over the scarf and recoiled sharply. Would that be blood, sir? I'm afraid so. Sean Lovell jerked to his feet. Going a bit sick, he shouted. Moving faster than Burden would have believed possible in a woman of her age, Mrs. Cantrip flung open the garden door. Not in my kitchen, you're not. With the unmoved scowl of the English rustic, the old gardener and the purveyor of game watched him stagger out, then listened with a quickened, though still apathetic interest, to the sounds of retching. Old stomach complaint, Alf said. No guts, he laughed. Wants to be a bleeding pop star. Mental, I reckon he is. Leaving the manor by the front and back doors respectively, Wexford and Burden encountered each other in the village street. There they exchanged news, and were about to embark on one of their acrimonious but valuable discussions, when Mrs. Cantrip, puffed with running, caught them up. "Oh, sir," she said to Burden, "I am glad I caught you. I won't apologise, for the way those two went on, old Will and Alf. Would I be in your way if I was to walk along with you a bit?" "Not at all, Mrs. Cantrip," said Wexford graciously. He stopped by the official car and told Bryant to drive it back to the station. "Who's Alf, Tawny?" "Just a fellow we get our veg and chickens and such from, sir. He lives in a caravan on the grounds at Clusterwell." "You wouldn't be interested in Alf, sir," she said primly. "I don't know," said Wexford. "Anyone associated with Mrs. Nightingale interests us, even if he only supplied her with vegetables." "Mrs. Nightingale never associated with him, sir," said Mrs. Cantrip, shocked. "If she'd ever heard of him, it was only through that Sean," she sighed. "Well, you may as well know, seeing as it's common gossip and the scandal of the village. Alf's carrying on with Sean's mother." "Dear me," said Wexford, "that's bad." "There's some as don't blame Alf, him being a widow man since his boy was 12, and what with no one to cook his meals and see to his things. It's her I blame, for like the Bible says, sir, woman is a temptation to man, and no two ways about it." "True," said Wexford with feeling. "I don't care for that Sean myself, but there's none as would deny Mrs. Lovell neglected him shameful. You might say he's never had no proper mother." "And Mrs. Nightingale never had a son." Mrs. Cantrip turned her face up to him. "That Sean wouldn't have dared think of Madam in that way," she said. "There are limits. Besides, Mrs. Nightingale, well, she didn't like people knowing her age. It went to my heart sometimes the way she wanted Sean and Catcher to feel she was the same age as what they were. And when Sean said she wasn't square, and once, when he said she was nicer to look at than any lady for miles round, she looked so pleased and happy." "He's a very handsome young man," said Wexford. "I can't see it myself, sir, but tastes differ. Well, here's where I live, so I'll say good night." They watched her go into the freshly painted white cottage, whose patchwork quilt garden was one of those Burden had earlier admired. She gathered into her arms a cushiony yellow cat, which had strolled out to meet her, and closed the door. "Poor neglected boy," said Wexford thoughtfully. "Inherits £300 under Mrs. Nightingale's will. I wonder if he knows, and if he thought it worth killing for. But we'll leave that for a moment, and call on the principal beneficiary." How would she receive the news, Wexford wondered? With surprised gratification? Or with fear that the will had been disclosed to official eyes? He told her baldly that Mrs. Nightingale's will was in her favour, and she shrugged her shoulders and said, "That's a surprise. I had no idea." Her expression was apathetic and indifferent, almost sleepy, as if she had recently passed through some ordeal so tumultuous that it eyes. He told her baldly that Mrs. Nightingale's will was in her favour, and she shrugged her shoulders and said, "That's a surprise. I had no idea." Her expression was apathetic and indifferent, almost sleepy, as if she had recently passed through some ordeal so tumultuous that it had left her drained of all feeling. "You didn't know she'd made a will? Or you don't know what she's left you?" "No to both," said Georgina. She sat down on the arm of a chair. Her blouse was sleeveless, and Wexford noticed the strong sinews of her shoulders and upper arms. "Mrs. Villiers, this puts rather a different complexion on the circumstance of your sister-in-law's death." "Does it?" I'm afraid I don't quite understand." "Let me explain, then." Wexford paused as the door opened and Dennis Villiers came in. "Oh, there you are, Dennis," his wife said, getting up. Her voice was still dull and toneless as she said, "Fancy, Elizabeth made a will and left me all those rings." Villiers put his thumb between the pages of his book to mark the place, and burst into a roar of hysterical laughter. Her husband's laughter had a far more disturbing effect on Georgina than had Wexford's tidings. Something had been slumbering under her veil of apathy. The laughter brought it to life, and it showed in her eyes and her trembling lips as raw terror. "Don't! Dennis, don't! I'll stop!" She clutched his arm and shook it. "May we share the joke, sir?" asked Wexford blandly. Villiers stopped laughing, and then, his face going blank, opened his book once more and began to read where he had left off. "Mrs. Villiers," said Wexford, "I want to talk to you again about the events of Tuesday night." "But why?" Her voice was barely under control. "I thought it was all over. I was just beginning to stop thinking about it, and now... Oh, God, what shall I do?" She ran from the room. Villiers smiled a little, apparently at something in his own book. "I see I shall have to read this book of yours," Wexford said. Villiers lifted his eyes, and again closing his book, kept his fingers inside it to mark the place. He took a copy of Wordsworth in Love from a stack on the window-sill and handed it to the Chief Inspector. "And have this, if it interests you." "Thank you. It will interest me. I'm always willing to be enlightened. For one thing, I'm curious to discover why you've made yourself an authority on Wordsworth." "Matter of taste," Mr. Wexford. "But there's always something to account for taste." Villiers shrugged impatiently. "Well, you've brought us the news, and we've had our little bit of literary chit-chat. Is there anything else?" "Certainly there is. I'm investigating a murder, Mr. Villiers. And not very fruitfully, if I may say so." "And what's the point, anyway?" he said. "Elizabeth is dead and cannot be resurrected. You find out who killed her and put him in prison for 20 or 30 years. Who benefits? Who's the happier for it?" "You're in favour of capital punishment, perhaps?" "Capital punishment? No, I'm not in favour of it. I don't care much. I don't care about people being kept in prison either, except that my tax pays for their board. Seems to me, sir, that you don't care much for anything." "That's so. I want to be left in peace to live in the past." "Then, let's discuss the past," said Wexford. "The recent past. Tuesday night, for instance." Sitting opposite Burden in the living room, Georgina said fretfully, "I told you about Tuesday night, last time you were here." "You just tell me again." "You left the manor at 10:30 in your husband's car. Who was driving?" "My husband." "What time did you reach home?" "I told you. About 20 to 11. We went in, and we went straight to bed, and that's all." "No, it isn't all. No one goes straight to bed. One of you must have put the car away. One of you must have locked up. Oh, well, if that's what you want. My husband just left the car in the drive. Mine was in the garage." "Did you both go into the house together?" "Of course, side by side, squeezing through the door at the same time." "Don't be silly," said Georgina petulantly. "I went in first and then my husband followed about a minute later. He locked the car because it was going to be left on the drive all night. He always does that." "Very prudent. Since you're evidently so careful, you wouldn't have put the milk bottles out before you went to the manor. Who did that when you got home? Who checked that all the windows were closed and the back door locked?" She played nervously with her beads. My husband always does that. I went to bed first. How long did it take you to get to bed, Mrs. Villiers? 10 minutes? A quarter of an hour? You didn't go to bed unwashed, and in all your clothes? Of course I didn't. I put the bedroom light on, and undressed, went to the bathroom, and then I went to bed. My husband came to bed. He always reads for about half an hour before we go to sleep. Double bed, Mrs. Villiers? No. We have twin beds, but you needn't read anything into that. We're a very happy couple. Now tell me, what time did you go to the manor? We got there at 8:30. I believe, said Burden disarmingly, that you often went there to play bridge. How long did you usually stay there? Sometimes till midnight in the holidays. Tuesday night was still in the holidays, wasn't it? Why did you leave so early? My husband, said Georgina, putting, as she always did, the self-conscious pride of ownership into the word. My husband had some research to do at the school, and... She clapped her hand over her mouth, but too late to stifle a little, sharp cry. When we got home, he stammered. He changed his mind and... Oh, why don't you leave us alone? We could be happy if everyone would leave us alone. Burton's stare was hard and penetrating. He looked at her without blinking. I left the car on the drive, said Villiers to Wexford. No, I didn't check the back door or the windows. That's my wife's province. I went straight to bed and straight to sleep. Burton came in. May I, sir? Go ahead, said Wexford. What about this research you were going to do at the school, sir? That took you away from the manor at 10:30. Villiers lit a cigarette. Don't you ever make excuses to get away from a boring host and hostess, Inspector? He said imperturbably. So, this was an empty excuse, he said. A deliberate lie. Sometimes I do tell lies, said Villiers, smoking with a kind of frivolous delicacy. I'm a good liar. Strange for a man who declares himself indifferent to the opinions of others, Wexford commented, and suddenly, meeting Villiers' arrogant eyes, a couplet came into his head. He quoted it. So much he soared, beyond or sunk beneath, the men with whom he felt condemned to breathe. The effect was not at all what he had expected. Villiers became feverishly pale. Statue still, he seemed to be waiting, and not, Wexford thought, for more words, but for action. And then, perhaps because both policemen stood in bewilderment, Villiers laughed. That laughter electrified Burden into rage. What do you want, Mr. Villiers, he almost shouted. What are you trying to prove? Why do you try to set yourself so much above everyone else? Or beneath them, Mr. Burden, or sunk beneath them. As to what I want, that's simple. He got up, turned his back. I want to die, he said. And what the hell, said Wexford thoughtfully, as they got back into the car, came over him when I quoted those lines? Search me, said Burden the Philistine. Where do they come from? Wordsworth? I don't know where they come from. They were just sort of floating about in my head. But I'd like to know, said Wexford. Mike, you say I'm jumping to conclusions, but I'm as near as damn it certain she did it. It is she and not her husband who inherits. She was at the manor when the torch was replaced. She knew the layout of the manor grounds, and she could have noticed the bonfire earlier in the evening. If she got blood on her clothes, she knew she could have burnt her outer clothes, say a sweater, on the fire. All this, said Burden, argues premeditation, that she deliberately chose a torch of all things for her weapon. Think about it. Try and see what you can make of it all. I'm going to pick up Lionel Marriott and take him to the Olive for a drink. The new cocktail bar at the Olive and Dove was almost deserted, for by now most of its patrons had deserted it for the dining room. Wexford shepherded Marriott into a secluded corner and placed a large whisky in front of him. "No," he said, "I want to hear about this holiday on the Costa Brava." "Holiday?" said Marriott, momentarily closing his eyes. "Really, I'd rather spend a fortnight in a labour camp. God knows how Villiers found time to go courting. You'd have thought that every minute would have been taken up, what with having to be a customs officer and a male nurse and a watch committee all rolled into one. Anyway, he met Georgina. She was holidaying there too. Only in the same sense that he was," said Marriott. "Georgina had gone to her own school party," he said. "A bunch of teenage nymphomaniacs, from what I heard. Dennis and she encountered each other on one of their nightly rounds of the local taverns, picking their charges off the floor, you know. Not that I heard any of this from Dennis. The first hint I got dropped in one evening. 'We've got some good news for you,' said Quen. 'Dennis has met a girl, and they're going to be married.' 'Fast worker,' I said. And then, of course, I had to say I was pleased, although I was thinking she must be out of her mind, poor thing. The Nightingales gave a dinner party for the bride. Everybody who was anybody was there. None of us had seen Georgina, so naturally we sat with bated breath. All the women were got up to the nines. Elizabeth looked wonderful. White velvet, you know. It always does something for a woman. Then in comes Georgina, in Woolworth's pearls, and well, we used to call them tub frocks, and this one had been in the tub a good many times, I can tell you. Did those women stare? Georgina wasn't a bit shy. In fact, she dominated the conversation at the table. We heard all about how she was going to make a real home for Dennis, and how they were going to have 6 children. Elizabeth was charming to her. She was bubbling over with gaiety, and she didn't look a day over 25. "Georgina," said Wexford. "Did she seem envious?" "Yes, I suppose she was envious. Of course, I've seen her dozens of times since then, and all she can talk about is what a marvellous marriage she and Dennis have, and how they're all in all to each other." "Are they?" "He's everything she wants," said Marriott. "Although we see no sign of these 6 children, do we? As for him, I think he's as bored with his second marriage as he was with his first." "You've been thinking," said Dr. Crocker on the following morning, "that she was wearing that scarf when the deed was done. Well, she wasn't. It would have been saturated with blood if she had." "You said you were out delivering a baby on Tuesday night," Wexford said. "I don't suppose your route took you through Clusterwell?" "Sure it did. Why?" "You know Villiers' bungalow? I passed it about 11. Were any lights on? Were the cars on the drive?" The doctor's face fell. "I didn't look." Burden came in wearily. 3 or 4 of us done a house-to-house in my fleet," he said. "I don't reckon any of them go out in the evenings. The whole place shuts up about 9, and those that aren't in bed are in the pub. Nobody passed that way, bar catcher Dawn, and she'll talk very freely about her goings-on with Nightingale and that waiter, but she shuts up like a clam when I tried to get her to describe her drive home. And another thing, Nightingale's Minnie was standing out by those stables, and young Lovell was doing his best to get a scratch off the front bumper. I don't know where all this is getting us, Mike. We aren't looking for a damaged car, but for a witness who saw something when he passed Villiers' bungalow." "I like all the ends tidied," said Burden. "Anyway, I checked downstairs, and no accident was reported on Tuesday night." "Now let's leave it, shall we?" said Wexford crossly. "Get Martin to go over to Clusterwell and find out if anyone does any regular nightly dog-walking. I may as well go myself," he added. "Spy out the land a bit. It's not possible no one used that road. But like those of my fleet, the inhabitants of Clusterwell stayed in at night, and judging by the number of mongrels Wexford encountered in the lanes, their dogs exercised themselves. A large black one, patrolling what looked like a field of allotments, growled at him as he approached the hedge. He decided to venture no nearer the caravan, in any case clearly deserted, which stood behind the runner bean vines and stacked chicken coops. Instead, he read the words on a shabby board mounted on poles. A. Tawny, new-laid eggs, roasting chickens, veg. "My fleet," he said tersely to his driver. Mrs. Cantrip was in her rocking chair, engrossed in her paper. "Alf Tawny, sir. If he's not out on his rounds, you'll likely find him over at Mrs. Lovell's." "How does he travel to and fro?" "On his bike, sir. He's got one of them big baskets on the handlebars of his bike." Wexford nodded. "Does he stay at Mrs. Lovell's all night?" It was easy to shock Mrs. Cantrip, who adhered to that school of thought which holds that fornication can only be committed between midnight and dawn. "Oh, no, sir," she said, flushing. "He's always gone by 11. I reckon even Mrs. Lovell's got some idea of what's right." The lovers were in the middle of their evening meal. A saucepan of baked beans stood in the middle of the clothless table. Mrs. Lovell reseated herself. "Lordship been up to something?" she asked. "My visit has nothing to do with Sean." It was clear to Wexford that he was to be offered no tea, but a glance at the cracked cups and the scum-ringed milk bottle told him he wasn't missing anything. "I hope to have the pleasure of a little talk with Mr. Tawney." "Spend a good deal of time here with your friends, do you, Mr. Tawney?" Mrs. Lovell gave a full-throated giggle. "My Sean's no friend of his," she said. "It's me you come to see, don't you, Alf?" Said Tawney lugubriously. "Do you fancy a cream horn, Alf?" "What time," said Wexford, "do you reckon on leaving Mrs. Lovell's to go home?" "Alf has to be up betimes," said Mrs. Lovell, looking more gypsy-ish than ever. "He's always gone by 11:15. With surprising intelligence, she said, "You want to know if he saw anything the night her up at the manor got killed?" "Precisely. I want to know if Mr. Tawney took a look at Mr. Villiers' bungalow as he was cycling back to Clusterwell." "Don't know about look. He tried to knock him up, didn't you, Alf?" Said Tawney. Very alert now, Wexford waited. "Go on, Alf. The gentleman asked you a question." Tawney spoke. "They're no good," he said. "They was out and the place locked up." "Now, let's get this straight," said Wexford, guessing for all he was worth, and mentally apologizing to Burden. Mr. Tawney was riding home when a car passed him and nearly knocked him off his bicycle. Mrs. Lovell's admiring grin told him he was guessing right, and he took the number of this car, intending to give it to the police so that the driver could be prosecuted. "He never took the number, he knew who it was. That foreign girl from the manor." Mr. Tawney knocked at the bungalow because he wanted to use their phone. "The place was all dark," said Mrs. Lovell with relish. "Alf banged and banged, but no one did. He never took the number, he knew who it was. That foreign girl from the manor." Mr. Tawney knocked at the bungalow because he wanted to use their phone. "The place was all dark," said Mrs. Lovell with relish. "Alf banged and banged, but no one come, did they?" "Nope," said Tawney. Talk about hearsay evidence, thought Wexford. "Alf left here about 10:30. He'd been knocking a long time when the clock struck 11. Trust the well church clock. Go on, Alf, you tell him you was there. I banged and no one come. He coughed horribly, and Wexford looked away. He's out and she's out, I said to myself. Might have known. The garage doors was open, and both cars was gone, so Alf gives up. And the next morning, while you cool off, don't you, you think to yourself, why bother when there's no bones broken? In September, even the best-kept gardens usually have a ripe, wild look. This one was a barren island among the fields, a sterile, characterless plot in which every unruly branch and every straggling stem had been docked, and there was nothing to provide shade. Dennis and Georgina Villiers sat in a pair of deck chairs. The man who said he never read newspapers was reading one now, apparently oblivious of his wife. She stared at him with the rapt attention of a cinema fanatic gazing at the screen. Wexford walked up to them. Over Villiers' shoulder, he looked at the newspaper and saw what he had been reading, a review of his own latest published work. "Mr. Villiers," he said roughly, "why did you tell me you came straight home from the Manor on Tuesday night and went to bed? This house was empty and in darkness at 11. Why didn't you tell me you went out again?" "I forgot," said Villiers calmly. Villiers' cold face showed neither fear nor embarrassment. The man had a curious strength, an iron self-control. He seemed unbreakable. Why, then, this strange sensation that he had been irrevocably broken long ago? "Have you also forgotten where you went?" "I went," said Villiers, "to the school library to look up a reference." "What reference?" With cool contempt, Villiers said, "Would it mean anything to you if I told you?" He shrugged. "All right. I was looking up the precise relationship of George Gordon Wordsworth to William Wordsworth." Somewhat to his own humiliation, Wexford found that it did indeed mean nothing. He swung round on Georgina. For once she wore no jewellery. "You went out where?" A voice came in a shrill squeak. I drove round the lanes." "May I ask why?" Villiers answered for her. "My wife," he said silkily, "was annoyed with me for going out. She did what she often does on such occasions. Took her own car and went for a country drive." He gave a waspish smile. "To cool her temper," he said. "I'm not convinced of any of this," said Wexford slowly. "I think we could talk more frankly down at the police station." Georgina gave a wild cry and threw herself into her husband's arms. He held her with almost a lover's tenderness. "No, no, no," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I must tell him. You must tell him." He was going to lie again. Wexford was sure of it. "What my wife wants me to tell you," said Villiers, "is that you've been a complete bloody fool. Let me give you a piece of advice, Chief Inspector. Next time you suspect anyone of murder for gain, you had better check up on the value of what they're gaining. I'm a good liar," he said urbanely, "but I'm not lying now. My sister's pieces of jewellery are all fakes. I'd be surprised if the whole lot would fetch more than £50. You had better look elsewhere, Mr. Wexford. You know as well as I do that your absurd, trumped-up case against my wife has nothing but motive to make it stand up. And where is your motive now?" Gone with the sun, thought Wexford, watching it sink behind the misty fields. He was suddenly quite sure that this time Villiers hadn't been lying. Catcher was nowhere to be seen, and it was Quentin Nightingale himself who admitted Wexford to the manor, but Wexford sensed her recent presence in the austere study. Quentin himself had the look of a lover dreaming of the past, impatient for the near future. Wexford's news jolted him into unwelcome reality. "Every piece of jewellery Elizabeth had I bought for her," he said. "I've still got the receipts for most of it, if you'd care to see them." "Later. First I should like to see the stones themselves again." Quentin opened the safe. Then he lifted the jewels from their boxes in handfuls. He picked out his dead wife's engagement ring and took it to the window, but the growing dusk defeated him, and returning he switched on the desk lamp. "My glasses," he said, "just by your elbow. Would you mind?" Wexford handed them to him. "This is a fake." There was a small quiver in Quentin's voice. "This isn't the ring I gave Elizabeth on our engagement." "How'd you know?" "Not because I'm an expert on precious stones. I shall have to find an expert to tell us for sure about the rest. But when I bought it for her, I had some words engraved inside. There's nothing inside this one. She had the stone copied and the platinum copied, but she didn't bother to have the words copied, because they meant nothing to her." How utterly indifferent following morning, to me. Shown in by Catcher, Wexford saw that Quentin wasn't alone. Dennis Villiers was with him, holding both Quentin's hands in his. "Anyway, my best congratulations, Quen. I couldn't be more glad for you." Then Villiers saw Wexford. He dropped his brother-in-law's hands, and his face set arrogantly. "May I know what ground there is for congratulations, sir?" Quentin, flushing, put a hand out to Catcher. "Perhaps I'm indiscreet to tell you, Chief Inspector. You might read so much into this. I'd like it kept secret for the time being," Quentin said. "Catcher and I are going to be married." Wexford put down his parcel. "Indeed," he said. "Then let me congratulate you also." "Naturally we shall wait 6 months. A year might be— I'm not waiting a whole year, Quentin. Half a year, perhaps. It is not fair if you are making me wait a whole year for my flat in London, and my new fast sports car, and my going all round the world for my honeymoon." So she was a gold-digger after all, Wexford thought sadly. He had been wrong. "Now, I should like to see you alone, sir," he said. "Yes, of course." Abruptly, Villiers threw open the French windows and walked out of the room. Casting a dazzling smile over her shoulder, Catcher followed him. "The jewellery," Wexford said laconically, "is all fake. She must have sold what you bought her and had exact copies made." "Why, Chief Inspector?" "I gave her all the money she could possibly have needed. She wanted more. She had only to ask. Would you have given her £30,000? I'm not a millionaire, Mr. Wexford. Your wife sold her jewellery because she needed money. Now why did she need money, Mr. Nightingale? And what did she do with it? We know she spent it. The bank account was overdrawn. Where did the money go?" Quentin shrugged unhappily. "Mr. Nightingale, I think your wife was blackmailed." Quentin leaned forward, frowning his bewilderment. "But that's impossible. People are only blackmailed when they've done something against the law. My wife was—" He waved a helpless hand, encompassing the room. Wexford understood what he was trying to put into words, but the woman who reigned here had been entirely cushioned by her position and her wealth from the squalor of criminal temptation. "It need not necessarily have been some offence against the law," said Wexford quietly, "but against morality." "You mean she might have been unfaithful to me and someone found out?" "Something of that kind, sir. No, Mr. Wexford. Whatever my wife had done, I would have forgiven her, and she knew it. I told her that I believed forgiveness to be part of love. I would never have divorced her. She was my wife. And even when we grew so terribly apart, I still believed that marriage was forever. A nice man, Wexford thought, his usual cynicism for a moment in abeyance. A kind and eminently civilized person. There are some things, he said, which cannot be forgiven. Do you know what would disgust you? Nothing Elizabeth could have done, Quentin said obstinately. Perhaps not. But she believed it would have disgusted you. Believed so firmly that she was prepared to pay £30,000 to keep it from you. If you say so, Quentin said helplessly. Who could she ever have known that would extort such money from her? I was hoping that you could tell me that. A servant? Mrs. Cantrip has been devoted to us for 16 years. Old Will, who is respect itself. Sean, who worshipped the ground she walked on. See yourself how absurd it is. Why should it be a servant anyway? It's more unlikely that it was one of her friends, isn't it, sir? You had a series of au pair girls, you told me. Ordinary young girls, Quentin said. They adored Elizabeth. Before the girls came, said Wexford, you had a married couple. What was the name again? Toohey, said Quentin Nightingale. The small white cottage was being scoured from top to bottom. When Wexford arrived, Mrs. Cantrip abandoned the cleaning that had necessarily to be done on a Saturday and sat down with the ginger cat in her lap. Toohey, sir, she said. Mr. Nightingale dismissed him for insolence. He never showed a proper respect, not from the start, and he never did a fair day's work, as far as I could see, always hanging about where he wasn't supposed to be, snooping and listening, if you know what I mean. And his wife? She wasn't so bad. She sent me a Christmas card 2 years running. You know their address, then? I never wrote back, sir, said Mrs. Cantrip. I did notice the first one had a Newcastle postmark. Did they continue in service? That I wouldn't know, sir. Toohey was always bragging and boasting. Going to set himself up in the hardware business, he said. But where would they get the capital, sir? They hadn't a penny to bless them. Having left Sergeant Martin to begin the search for Toohey, Wexford drove down Tabard Road. He noted with an inward chuckle that Burden looked anything but pleased to see him. "Carry on painting," said Wexford. "I only want you to lend an ear while I talk." And he told Burden about the jewellery and about Toohey. I was wondering if what this Toohey found out was the secret of Villiers and Mrs. Nightingale's intense dislike of each other. There's no doubt Nightingale is very attached to Villiers, and if he found out his wife had once done her brother some terrible injury. But what terrible injury, sir? Wexford sat down on the short step-ladder. I wonder if it's possible that Toohey killed her himself. If it was he she met in the forest, and he killed her when she told him her source of supply had come to an end, then how, Burden objected, did he get hold of the torch? He was the last person to have access to the garden room in the manor. True. Now, let's see. Our case against Georgina falls to the ground because we know Georgina had no motive. Villiers remains a possibility. He could have killed her. Because, her money having come to an end, she told him she would reveal everything to Nightingale. That bloody secret, whatever it was. Sean could have killed her because he saw her with another man. No, sir. We know it was premeditated. The killer took the torch with him. Wexford said suddenly, "Of course. Why didn't I think of it before?" We realized almost from the first that when you're going to a place that you know will be dark, you take a torch with you. But you take your own torch, don't you? We've been daft, Mike. We thought of someone going to the manor and taking the Nightingale's torch. But why should they? What possible purpose could there be in going out of your way and securing a weapon that was the property of the woman you intended to kill? Why not bring your own? You mean that if we exclude Nightingale himself, the only possible person to have taken that torch into the wood was Elizabeth herself? That's what I mean. And you know what else it means? No one would choose a torch as a murder weapon if there was anything else to hand. Therefore, no one planned this murder. The killer was overcome by an impulse of the moment and struck Elizabeth Nightingale with the torch she herself had brought with her. Burden nodded gravely. She brought it, he agreed, but someone else put it back. And Wexford asked himself, how did Villiers know the jewels were fakes? On sunny days, the patrons of the Olive could have their drinks at tables in the garden. "But I've told you the whole story, Reg," Marriott said. "There isn't any more." Wexford said sharply, "Do you think it possible that Villiers is homosexual?" "Oh, my dear, I shouldn't think so." "What about Quentin Nightingale?" "Quentin certainly isn't. I have a shrewd suspicion he is chasing that little Dutch girl." Wexford wasn't going to betray Nightingale's confidence, even by a nod of agreement. "I wondered," he said, "if Elizabeth knew her brother was homosexual, and hated him for it, but was prepared to go to considerable lengths to keep it dark. I don't see why she'd get murdered for that." Finishing his drink, Wexford decided not to breathe a word to Marriott about the blackmail payments. "No, it's more likely she was seen in the forest with a man and the person who saw her killed her," he added thoughtfully. "My little songbird, the only true..." "I've remembered something," Marriott said. "Elizabeth used to send a hell of a lot of parcels, smallish brown paper parcels. Often when I've been up there in the daytime, I've seen a parcel on the hall table, but there was always a letter or two waiting for the post on top of it. Any use to you?" "I don't know, but thanks all the same." "You're welcome, my dear," said Marriott. He added rather wistfully, "Don't drop me, Reg. Now you've squeezed me dry." "Even a copper needs friends," said Wexford. And then he walked back up the high street to the police station. Burden was sitting at the rosewood desk eating a sandwich lunch. "Clear out of it," said Wexford crossly. "You're making crumbs on my blotter." "Sorry, sir," said Burden virtuously. "I thought you'd gone on a pub crawl." Wexford gave an ill-tempered snort. "Any news?" "Not yet. No dice from either of the Newcastles." "Mike, Tui didn't meet Mrs. Nightingale in any forest. She sent his money to him in parcels. I don't know to what address, but we could try asking Katja. You've had your lunch, so I suggest you get out there now." Wexford sent Brian to the canteen to fetch him some lunch, and after that he decided to read to keep himself awake. Since the only reading matter he had to hand, apart from a heap of reports, was the book Dennis Villiers had given him, he read that. Or, to put it more accurately, he read the first 3 paragraphs, only to nod off, and nearly jump out of his skin when the phone bell shrilled. "Try hardware shops," he told his caller tiredly, "especially those which have changed hands in the past 4 years. He may have changed his name." With a spark of inspiration he added, "I'd be interested in any ironmonger's shop called Nightingale's, or, say, the Manor Stores of Wordsworth in Love. Flicked on to find the family tree. There, in strong black type, was the name George Gordon Wordsworth. He had been, Wexford noted, the poet's own grandson. And this piece of information was what Villiers had led him to believe he had sought from the school library. The man had a weakness, then. the weakness of underrating his opponent. It was nearly 6 before Burden got back. "Could she remember the address on the parcels?" "She says she only posted parcels of stuff Mrs. Nightingale sent to Holland, except for last Tuesday, the day Mrs. Nightingale got killed. Then she posted 2, one to her mother in Holland and another one. She never even looked at the address." Wexford shrugged. "Well, it was worth a try, Mike. Go home. They can put through any calls that come in. It might take days, it might take weeks, but eventually Tui would be found, and then Wexford thought, as he drove past the King's School, he would talk. On to Myfleet. The church bells of Clusterwell were ringing for evensong, and as soon as their chimes died away behind him, he heard those of Myfleet ahead, 8 bells ringing great brazen changes through the evening air. There was a note pinned to Mrs. Cantrip's front door. "Gone to church, back 7:30. An invitation to burglars, Wexford thought, only he couldn't remember any burglary taking place in Myfleet for 10 years. Breathing in the scent of the pines that all day had been bathed in sunshine, Wexford entered the forest. The path he took was the path Elizabeth Nightingale had taken that night. If her companion was Tui, observed perhaps by Sean, who misunderstood the purpose of their meeting, how had Tui come? Over the black wooded hill from Pomfret, or by the path that skirted the Myfleet cottage gardens and came out eventually where? Wexford decided to explore it. The church bells had stopped, and the place was utterly silent. He walked between the straight, narrow pine trunks, looking up sometimes at the patches of pale, silvery sky, the only visible life that of the midges which danced in swarms. He was glad when the trees to the left of him petered out and he found himself walking against the cottage fences. Presently, ahead of him, he heard a whisper of music. Just as he was thinking how pleasant and undemanding it sounded on this peaceful summer evening, it was succeeded by an appalling electric cacophony. Wexford put his head over the fence and stared into the square plot of land, part wilderness and part rubbish dump, which was the Lovells' back garden. From the open kitchen window, some 50 feet of electric lead stretched to the shed from which the noise emanated. Inside the shed someone was speaking. The tone and timbre of the voice were unmistakable, its accent deliberately cultivated. Mid-Atlantic, Wexford decided. With mounting curiosity, he listened. Addressing his unseen, indeed non-existent audience as guys and dolls, Sean Lovell made a short, dismissive comment on the last piece of music and then, more enthusiastically, announced his next record. This time, it was the effusion of a big band. It stopped. Sean spoke again, and as he took in the full implication of his words, a shaft of intense pity pierced Wexford. Perhaps, he thought, few things are so sad as eavesdropping on a man alone with his daydreams, a man indulging his solitary, private, and ridiculous vice. "And now," said the disembodied voice, "what you've all been waiting for. Here he is, boys and girls. Let's have a big hand for your own Sean Lovell." Unaccompanied, he began to sing. Wexford walked away, very delicately and softly for such a big man, his feet scarcely causing a crackle on the needled forest floor. He knew now what Sean had been doing that night, what he did every night, and would perhaps do for years until some girl caught him and showed him how daydreams die and that life is digging a rich man's garden. Wexford rubbed his eyes and looked at the luminous hands of his watch. It was 2:05. If he woke at that hour, he knew he would never go to sleep again, and his usual habit was to go downstairs, sit in an armchair, and find something to read. As a young man, when he had had more spare time and less responsibility, he'd been a great reader, and literary criticism and writers' biographies had been amongst his favourite reading matter. He remembered how Dora had asked him why he wanted to read what somebody else had said about a book. Why not just read the book itself? And he hadn't quite known how to answer her. How in this field he couldn't trust his own judgment, because he was only a policeman and he hadn't a university degree. Nor could he have told her that he needed instruction and knowledge, because the purpose of education is to turn the soul's eye towards the light. He turned to Wordsworth in love. He might as well have another go at it. Pity it was about Wordsworth, though. Rather a dull poet, he thought. All that communing with nature. Now, if only it had been about Lord Byron, say, that would have been a different matter, something to get his teeth into. There was an interesting character for you, a romantic, larger-than-life man with his sizzling love affairs, his disastrous marriage, the scandal over Augusta Lee. He began to read, and after a while he began to wish he had read more of Wordsworth's poetry. He had no idea the man had been in love with a French girl, had been involved in the Revolution, and had narrowly missed losing his head. It was good, bracing stuff, and Villiers wrote well. He read on, utterly absorbed, and by now considerably excited. He finished the last chapter and closed the book. Sighing, he thought coldly, "You ignorant fool. If only it had been Byron, my God, if only it had, I would have known the answer long ago." "The first morning of term," said John Burden, finishing his third slice of toast and marmalade, "is worse than the first day of term. Can I have a lift, Dad? Old Roman Villa's taking us for prayers, and there'll be hell to pay if I'm late." "Don't say hell to pay," said Burden absently. "Come on, then. I've got a busy day ahead of me. A day of hunting for a needle in a haystack, of running a predator to earth." He marched into the police station and met Sergeant Martin in the foyer. "Anything turned up on TUI yet?" "No, sir, but Mr. Wexford said he wanted to see you as soon as you came in." The Chief Inspector was sitting at his desk with an air of triumph. "You're late," he snapped. "I had to go over and swear out the warrant myself." The Chief Inspector was sitting at his desk with an air of triumph. "You're late," he snapped. "I had to go over and swear out the warrant myself." "What warrant? You mean you found TUI?" "TUI be damned," said Wexford, jumping up. "We're going to Cloisterwell to make an arrest." Obediently, Burden followed him. "Villiers' place?" Burden asked, and when Wexford nodded, "Well, you won't find him there. He's taking school prayers this morning." "How bloody unsuitable." Wexford gave an explosive snort. "We'll take one of the WPCs with us, Mike." "Shall we, indeed? When are you going to tell me who we are arresting and why?" "In the car," said Wexford. "On the way." "And how you suddenly happened to see the light?" Wexford smiled a smile full of triumph and renewed confidence. "I couldn't sleep," he said, as they waited for the policewoman. "So I read a book. I'm an ignorant old policeman, Mike. I don't read enough. I should have read this one when its author first gave it to me." "I didn't know it was a detective story, sir," said Burden innocently. "Don't be so bloody silly," Wexford snapped. "I don't mean the book outlines the murder plan. Anyway, there was no plan." "Of course not. It was unpremeditated." "Yes, you were right there, and right about a lot of things," Wexford said. Someone else must have stood on the dais and commanded the boys to lift up their hearts and voices, while Dennis Villiers was at home. "I took the day off," he said to Wexford. I'm not well." "You do look ill, Mr. Villiers," said Wexford gravely, and meeting the man's eyes, "and you don't seem curious about the purpose of our call." "I'm not. I know why you've come." "You underrate your opponent, Mr. Wexford." "And you have always underrated yours." Villiers gave a slight, painful smile. "Yes, we have been a mutual denigration society." "Georgina?" She came out, shoulders hunched, head bent, and crumpled into her husband's arms. He held her in a close embrace, and he stroked her hair. Wexford heard her murmuring to him, begging him not to leave her. She wore no jewellery but her wedding and engagement rings. It was so painful to watch that he couldn't bring himself to speak the words of the charge. Suddenly she lifted her head and looked at them over her husband's shoulder. Tears were pouring down her freckled cheeks. "Yes, I killed Elizabeth," she said hoarsely. "Torch was on the ground. I picked it up and killed her. I'm glad I did it. I'd known before, I would have killed her sooner. I killed her as soon as I knew." Very quietly, Wexford spoke the words of the charge. "I don't care what you take down in writing," she said. "I did it because I wanted to keep my husband. He's mine. He belongs to me. I never had anyone else to belong to me. She had everything, but I had only him." Villiers listened with a still, set face. "May I go with her?" "Of course you may." The policewoman took Georgina to the waiting car, an arm around her shoulders. Burden followed them. Villiers looked at Wexford. "She can't tell you very much. I'm the only person living who knows it all." "Yes, Mr. Villiers. We shall need to take a statement from you." "I've written something already. Other people talk, or else shut it all up inside themselves. But writers write. I wrote this in the night. I haven't been able to sleep. I haven't slept at all." And the envelope was waiting on the hall table, propped against a vase. Taking it, Wexford saw that it was addressed to him, and that there was a stamp on it. "If you hadn't come this morning, I should have posted it. I couldn't have borne the waiting any longer. And now you have it, perhaps I shall sleep." "Shall we go, then?" said Wexford. As they entered King's Markham, Wexford slit open the envelope and glanced briefly at the first typewritten sheet. Then the car swung onto the police station forecourt. He got out and opened the near side front door, but Villiers didn't move. Wexford saw with a sudden shaft of compassion, the first he had ever felt for the man, that Villiers was fast asleep. For the attention of Chief Inspector Wexford. I'll keep this statement as brief as I can. I am writing it at night while my wife sleeps. Yes, she can sleep, the sleep of the innocent, just avenge her. When you quoted Byron to me, I was sure that you knew why, if you did not know how. But did you even know what you were saying? I stared at you. I waited for you to arrest my wife, and my face must have told you what I was afraid of. That to frighten me and extract a confession from me, you had quoted to me the words of a man all the world knows to have been his sister's lover. I think I betrayed myself then. I certainly did so when I gave you my book to read. But then I thought you were too ignorant, too dull and plodding, to equate a short passage in my book with my own life. Now, as the dawn comes up, and I remind myself of my provocative rudeness to you and your civilized forbearance. As I remember your precipience, I know that I was wrong. You will read, and you will realize, thou best philosopher, thou eye among the blind. Wordsworth wrote that, Mr. Wexford. Wordsworth, as you now know, also loved his own sister. But being a disciple of duty, stern daughter of the voice of God, he left her. You will no longer need to ask what attracted me to Wordsworth. For although Dorothy appears in my book as the merest interlude between Annette and Mary, you will have noted the parallel. You will have realized what drew me to this poet. I might, of course, have chosen Lord Byron. The obviousness of the choice repelled me. Besides, I did not want to waste my muse on one whom I considered superficial and grandiloquent, a swashbuckling pop star, simply because he had committed incest, very probably, with Augusta Lee. But I am forgetting my promise to be brief. When we were children, I did not love my sister. We were always quarrelling, and our separation caused us no distress. I did not see her again till I was in my last year at Oxford. Our meeting was at the 21st birthday party of a university acquaintance of mine. This man's father introduced me to his secretary, a girl called Elizabeth Langham. We went out together, and soon we became lovers. I had no idea who she really was. 9 years had passed and we had altered. I asked her to marry me, and then she had to tell me. For 2 months, I had been my own sister's lover. For years she had followed my fortunes, from envy and a sense of unfairness of the arrangement that had been made for us. Having run away to London with a man called Langham, who had paid for her to take a secretarial course, she took a job with my friend's father. Knowing that his son and I were at Oxford together, she went to the party, curious to see me. She came out with me with some unformed plan of revenge in her mind. But then the situation passed out of her control. In spite of what she knew, did it trouble her? She had fallen in love with me. I don't think so. Long before this she had passed far beyond the confines of accepted morality, so that she saw this step only as something especially daring and defiant of society. We parted. She to America with her employer, I to Oxford. I will not dwell on my feelings at this time. You are a sensitive man, and perhaps you can imagine them to yourself. I married as soon as I had my degree, not for love. I have never in my life been in love with anyone but Elizabeth, but for safety, for normality. Knowing that I could never make a living from writing poetry, or from writing about it, I applied for a teaching job at the King's School. Elizabeth had told me that she hated King's Markham. I thought I had found the one town in the world my sister would be sure to avoid. It was Lionel Marriott who told me Elizabeth was here. I dreaded meeting her. I longed to see her. We met. And that, Mr. Wexford, was the second beginning. Our love would have been impossible without the innocent acquiescence of Quentin Nightingale. I suppose Elizabeth had been in love with Quentin when she married him, and had meant to be an honest, faithful wife. Immediately I re-entered her life, she put all this behind her, and began to use him as a tool. Her aim was to have me as her lover, and at the same time to keep her position, her money and her reputation. She wanted the best of both worlds, and she got them. I was as guilty as she. The difference between us was that I had a conscience, and she had none. She told Quentin, pretending June was her source, but I was a difficult man with a disturbed personality. It would be a kindness on his part to befriend me. Characteristically, he reacted by offering me a room in the old house for my exclusive use. It was to seem as if all my invitations to the manor came from Quentin, for Elizabeth and I must appear to dislike each other. She said that if we showed even normal fraternal affection in public, we should soon be betrayed into showing a deeper love than is permitted to brother and sister. I do not believe this was her true reason. Rather, I think she loved intrigue for its own sake, and our public indifference lent a spice to our private love. And if I say that I loved Quentin too, will you call this the vilest hypocrisy? Or has your experience taught you that it is often those whom we have betrayed and deceived and dishonoured that we love the best? Yes, Mr. Wexford, I loved Quentin. I shall now come to Tui. He had been watching Elizabeth visit me at the old house, and one day he saw me walk down the stairs with her and embrace her. It was not a brother's embrace, and Tui from outside the window took a photograph. I paid him blackmail. When he had bled me white, Elizabeth began selling her jewellery and having copies made. You've not found Tui yet, have you? Let me help you. Apart from saving Georgina as much suffering as I can, I have only one wish left, and that is to see Tui as wretched as he made Elizabeth and me. You will find his address on the dressmaker's bills in the writing desk in her bedroom. Tanya Tai is the name of the woman with whom he lives in a luxury flat over the shop in Bruton Street. Whenever Tui wanted money, he would send Elizabeth a bill from Tanya Tai, and the money she was to pay was the sum on the bill plus 1 nought added to the figure. For example, if the bill was for £150, Elizabeth was to send him 1,500. She sent the money in brown paper parcels. The last one was posted by Katja the day before Elizabeth died. I suppose you will know that the Nightingales and I always took our holidays together, and that 2 years ago Elizabeth and I went to Monumental. That is what she said. But I knew her so well, solo mea sponsor. I knew that her money and her position meant as much to her as I did. She was used to her 2 worlds, her eggs in 2 baskets, and leaving out the terror of Tui, I think she was mostly happy. I had come to the end. I was 36, and all my life I had worked hard, but I had nothing. I had no wife, no children, no friends, and I lived in 3 rooms. The time would come when Elizabeth, tranquilized by middle age, would sacrifice me to her. I decided to make a complete break, so I refused all Quentin's invitations to the manor. I thought I should be able to work. Instead I lay evening after evening on my bed, thinking, doing nothing, sometimes contemplating suicide. It was a dark night of the soul, comparable to the breakdown Wordsworth had when he had to leave France and leave Annette behind. I no longer wanted Elizabeth. It was Quentin that I missed. I went to the manor and told them I would not go to Rome with them. I looked at Elizabeth and felt nothing. It was incomprehensible to me that I had wasted the best of my life in loving her. I went to Spain as escort to the school party. Georgina was staying at the same hotel and fell in love with me, poor thing. I had had everything, and rich in gifts, had squandered them all. She had never had anything. The youngest child of a large poor family, no man had ever wanted her or taken her out more than a couple of times. She was plain and shy and dull. A poor, ill-favoured thing, but mine own. We were married. I brought Georgina to the manor, and to the disappointment in Quentin's eyes. Elizabeth was triumphant in her white velvet and her fake jewels. I looked at her, I looked at poor Georgina, and I asked myself, as once again I fell in love with my sister, what have I done? The third beginning and the last. I wanted to settle down. I wanted children. But I did not listen to the stern daughter of God's voice, nor even to the shriller, querulous voice of my wife. I listened to my sister. So we come to the day of Elizabeth's death. No, of course you didn't believe me when I said I went down to the school library in the evenings to do the research for my work. Only someone as innocent and as uninterested in literature as Georgina could believe that. I went to meet Elizabeth in the forest. I have said that Georgina accepted my excuses, but if she had, Elizabeth would be alive today. Georgina had begun to doubt me, and to a woman as possessive as she, doubt calls for action. We went to the manor and played bridge. Just before we left, Elizabeth gave Georgina a silk scarf. She used to give Georgina a lot of her cast-off clothing. I suppose it amused her, knowing that Georgina would look less well in it than she, and that I would notice and make the obvious unjust comparison. I drove Georgina home and went out again to meet Elizabeth. We sat on a log. We smoked, talked. Elizabeth had brought with her that torch from the garden room, for the moon had gone in and it was dark. At about 11:20, she said we should go. She said to spend too long in the forest would be to tempt Providence. We walked to the car together with our arms round each other. As we went, we saw the headlights of another car moving on the road, as if searching for the fringe of the forest with its beams. It passed on and we forgot it. When we came to my car, Elizabeth said she had forgotten her torch and must go back for it. I wanted to go with her, but she said that she would be safe alone. I took her in my arms and kissed her, just as I had kissed her on the day Tui was outside the window. Then I drove home. Georgina was not there when I got back, nor was her car. She came in at midnight, shivering in a thin shirt, for she had burned her sweater on Palmer's bonfire, and in her hand she held a blood-stained torch, wrapped up in newspaper. She had followed me, and seen me kiss Elizabeth. So she waited by the log for Elizabeth to come back for the torch. What happened then I only know from what Georgina told me. She was shocked by what she had seen. She tried to express this to Elizabeth, but she was incoherent. She was hysterical, and Elizabeth laughed at her. What did she, Georgina, think she could do about it? She asked her. We would not be lovers forever. Georgina must wait, and one day I would return to her. Surely she would not risk the scandal that would arise if she made scenes or told anyone. Elizabeth bent over to find the torch, which she had thought had fallen behind the log. It had not. Georgina was holding it, and she raised it, and struck my sister, again and again, until Elizabeth was dead. Georgina pulled the scarf off, and wiped her own hands with it. Then she crossed the road, stuffed the scarf into a hollow tree, and burnt her sweater on Palmer's bonfire. Then Georgina came home and told me. I confessed the whole story to her. I told her about the blackmail and about the jewels. I know what you are asking me. Why didn't I, as my sister's lover and dearest friend, immediately give my wife up to you? And you have provided your own answer, that I was afraid of the relationship becoming known. But it was not entirely that. I was almost stunned with horror with grief, and yet even then I wanted to salvage my life. With Elizabeth gone, I might yet settle down, be peaceful, be happy. Man is a strange creature, Mr. Wexford. The whole world may lie in ruins about him, but still he looks for a corner to run into, and clings to his hope that it can never, no matter what bombardment he has suffered, be too late. At that moment, I loathed Georgina. I could have beaten her to death, but I told myself that what had happened was my fault. So instead of doing violence to her, I took her in my arms and smelt Elizabeth's blood in her hair and under her fingernails. I washed the torch myself and threw away the wet batteries. I ran a bath for Georgina and told her to wash her hair. The skirt she had been wearing and her shirt I burnt on the kitchen boiler. I could not see why you should suspect Georgina, for she had no apparent motive, and that is why I grew hysterical when you brought us the news of the will. To arrest my wife and convict her for the wrong motive, that would have been the ultimate irony. She was very nervous. When we were alone, she told me she would like to confess, for you or any right-thinking person would understand. I prevented her. I thought we still had a chance. Then you quoted Lara to me, and I began to make notes in preparation for this statement. It is all over now. You will, I'm sure, be gentle with Georgina, and I know that during her trial every newspaper reader in this country will be for her heart and soul, as well as those more significant arbiters, the judge and jury. She will go to prison for 2 or 3 years, and then one day she will marry again, have the children she needs, and the normal, quiet life she wants. Soon Quentin will have his little Dutch girl, a chatelaine of my fleet, and if she is unfaithful to him, it will be a natural run-of-the-mill infidelity that my kind brother will bear with a perhaps not too painful fortitude. As for Elizabeth, she died at the height of her love and her triumph, and just in time to avoid the bitterness of growing old. I have my deserts. I have no idea what I shall do, but I think it unlikely that after the trial any authority will wish to employ me on its teaching staff. I care very little about that. I think I can bear the scandal without too much distress. I can do without people. The one person I cannot do without, I shall never see again. And this thing, which is unbearable, I must bear. I shall never again kiss her in the dark forest, or among the shadows of the old house, or see her dressed in white velvet, or hear her name spoken with admiration. She is dead, and her death is for me the ultimate, irreparable mutilation. Your inspector asked me what I wanted, and nothing has happened to make me change my answer.